For as long as people have called this place home, they've been welcomed with clean air, clean water, and an abundance of nature. As time went on, people saw the need to balance how we build cities with how we protect farms and forests. That's why across Greater Portland, in 24 cities and 3 counties, there's one metro government that brings us all together to maintain that vital balance, to provide services across cities and counties, to create a better future together. Hello, we're Metro. We plan for housing, jobs, and safe transportation. We protect land, air, and water by managing garbage and recycling. We support arts and culture by overseeing local venues to keep the economy growing. And we connect people to nature across 17,000 acres of parks and trails and at the Oregon Zoo. Metro is all of us working together, connecting how we live today with how we plan for the future. Hello, we're Metro, and so are you.
Good morning. We have a quorum, and I'm calling the Metro Council business meeting for November 30th, 2023 to order. Connor, will you please call the roll for attendance?
Yes, thank you. Councillor Nolan.
Present. Good morning.
Good morning. Councillor Gonzalez.
Good morning. Present.
Good morning. Councillor Rosenthal.
Present.
Councillor Wong.
Present.
Councillor Lewis.
Present.
Councillor Simpson.
Present.
And President Peterson.
Here, thanks. We will move on to playing our safety video for our in-person attendees, which we have a nice, almost full house today, so pay attention. We want to make sure everybody's safe.
I'm Mike Reese, and I'm the dive safety officer here at the Oregon Zoo, and safety is a big part of my job. Some of the things we consider here is diver safety. I'm out here at the Oregon Zoo, and you're at the Metro Regional Center. The council chamber is located on the 3rd floor of this building. In the event of fire or fire alarm, please exit through the door in the northeast corner of the room, go down the steps to the 2nd floor, and exit through the main entrance by the reception desk and gather in the courtyard outside the entrance. In the event of a medical or fire emergency, please call 911 and notify the security agent at the front desk. The nearest defibrillator is mounted on the steps leading from the reception desk down to Grand Avenue. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, I will now open up the public communication on non-agenda items. For those tuning in, we will have an opportunity.
I'm Bob Lee, one of the animal curators here at the Oregon Zoo, and safety is a huge part of our job.
You know, the elephants always trump me. Trump, get it? Anyway. For those tuning in, we will have an opportunity for public comment on the RTP ordinance and the high-capacity transit strategy later on the agenda, following our staff presentation on those items. This is for non-agenda items. So Connor, will you please describe to the audience our procedures for the public communication portion of the meeting on non-agenda items?
Yes, thank you, President Peterson. So if anyone wishes to testify on non-agenda items, now is the time to do so. Public testimony will be limited to 3 minutes, and I'll manage a timer to go off at the 3-minute mark. If you've not already signed up to speak, you can do so now. If you're joining us in person, you can sign up by filling out one of the blue cards in the back of the room and bringing that up to me. If you're joining us on Zoom, you can sign up by hitting the raise hand button, which, depending on your version of Zoom, is either at the bottom of your screen or within the reactions tab. For those on Zoom, I'll be promoting you up to a full panelist, so I'll call your name. You'll see a window pop up asking you to accept that promotion. Once you do so, you'll rejoin and be able to turn on your camera and unmute yourself. And as a reminder to everybody testifying today, you do not need to give your physical address. However, please do identify yourself for the record before testifying. So with that, President Peterson, councilors, we haven't had anybody sign up in advance for testimony on non-agenda items. I don't see any hands going up in the crowd. Oh. And still no hands going up, President Peterson.
All right, well, seeing no one running forward, I will close the public communication on non-agenda items and move on to our first ordinance, which is a second reading and vote. Ordinance number 23-1496 for the purpose of amending the 2018 Regional Transportation Plan, or RTP, to comply with federal and state law and amending the Regional Framework Plan. Today we are considering an ordinance to adopt the 2023 Regional Transportation Plan. We held the first reading and public hearing on September 28th. Today we are also considering item resolution number 23-5348 for the purpose of adopting the 2023 Regional High Capacity Transit Strategy, which we most recently discussed at our November 7th meeting. Because this ordinance and resolution are connected, we will have the staff presentations together before we move to public comment. I invite members of the public to comment both on the high capacity transit strategy and the RTP during public testimony on the 2023 RTP. Today we have Catherine Charlo, Metro's Planning and Development Director, to kick us off.
Thank you so much, Council President Peterson and council members. We are very grateful for this opportunity to present one final time on the 2023 Regional Transportation Plan development and approval process today, and also to share a little bit about the high capacity transit strategy. You'll hear a short presentation from Kim and from Allie. I'll introduce them right at the end of my presentation on both the MPAC and JPAC recommendations for each plan. Then you'll receive public testimony on both plans, as Council President Peterson said, and then you'll vote on whether to approve those plans. If we could have the slides up there, I'd like to just share the second slide, please. If we could move one slide forward. Thank you. So the Regional Transportation Plan, as you know, we've talked about this a lot, sets the course for our regional vision for transportation. It uses our population and employment projection growth to identify travel needs and solutions. It establishes priorities and it resets the clock. And this is a really important piece of it. The transportation plan, the Regional Transportation Plan, is not a static thing. It is a perennially evolving and incrementally changing plan. This is a milestone for federal approval, but it is not actually, it's a reset and a milestone, but it's not actually a set in stone forever change. And then if just we could move to the next slide. The last couple of things I'd like to just reflect on. We talked about the vision in the last slide, and this slide this slide shows a little bit more some of the interrelated pieces of that vision and the goals and policies that guide those future transportation actions and investments. These really reflect the input over the past 2 years that we've heard from you, from JPAC, from MPAC, from TPAC, and from MTAC. So the advisory committees and a great deal of public engagement, which Kim will talk about. It also reflects the plan that you're going to look at, the Regional Transportation Plan, reflects the needs and priorities of a very diverse region. And I appreciate greatly the way you all have engaged in addressing those needs and priorities and thinking about both what is similar across the region and what is different. Each city, county, and agency has submitted projects intended to advance the goals on this slide. Probably in the nature of public policy, nobody is going to be completely happy with the plan because it really does reflect a diversity of opinions. But it is an important step forward for us as a region to address different needs in different places. One final note, moving forward, addressing this region's transportation funding crisis is crucial to the goals on this slide. If we don't address that, it's going to be difficult to move forward the safety projects, the climate projects, the equity projects that are so important in the plan. You all have talked about that and you've directed us to put time and effort toward addressing that funding crisis. And we come to you with a strong commitment as staff and as the committees to work on that. With that, I'm going to turn it over to Kim Ellis, who is going to talk about the Regional Transportation Plan, last couple bits of information, and then Allie Holmquist, who's going to talk about the high capacity transit strategy. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Council President Peterson, members of the council. So next slide, please. I will just walk us through where we've been and what's ahead a little bit following your final action today. This just highlights here for the 2-year process that we've, a little over 2 years that we've been working on this to update our vision, update the needs, priorities, also to map out project priorities in the near term as well as the long term, and then identified things that we need to continue working on going forward into the future. In your packet for your action are the recommendations that came before you from both the Metro Policy Advisory Committee and the Joint Policy Advisory Committee on Transportation. Next slide. That 2-year process, I really want to highlight, as Catherine just said, your leadership in this work, but also all of the jurisdictional partners who participated and worked hard as well throughout this process, and the deep community engagement that we have done through this process to raise marginalized voices, bring more perspectives to what is in the plan that is before you today, and to continue to increase and improve how we're engaging communities, how we're working together as a region throughout this process. Next slide. The result of that work is the Regional Transportation Plan, 2023 Regional Transportation Plan, as well as the High Capacity Transit Strategy that Ali will speak to following me. Next slide. And this plan, as Catherine said, is really a point in time to really help us as a region continue to move forward to address all the needs for households and businesses across the region. The plan includes growth in transit, both in terms of access to transit, but increased service across the region. There's many projects in the plan that are going to help improve safety, improve reliability of the system, and increase options for how people and goods can move around the region. It invests significantly in providing more affordable, climate-friendly options, and it does reduce greenhouse gas emissions as we are required to do to meet our air quality and climate goals. Next slide. As Catherine also said, we recognize that there's a lot more work ahead. This is a point in time. We do update the plan every 5 years, and this update really sets the foundation for future work and investment and continuing to work with our jurisdictional partners, with community and business to make the transportation system in this region the best that it can be. It allows your approval, if approved today, really allows a continuation of receiving federal transportation dollars. It allows projects to go forward, to be built or further planned. And it also identifies specific areas that we will continue to work with you and our partners and others to do more study, more analysis, and continue having discussions on how we advance the future of the transportation system in this region. Next slide. The recommendations before you in your materials have specific recommended changes to the plan in response to all of the feedback that we received during the 45-day public comment period held this summer. And then in particular, the recommendations that are coming to you from MPAC and JPAC, in addition to those specific changes, there are specific recommendations about how we work together to continue to align the project list with the values and priorities, the goals and vision in the plan. Working together to ensure that as those tolling projects that are undergoing a planning process in our region, that local and regional concerns are addressed as part of the planning work that's underway, but also as they go forward to implementation. There's recommendations specific to working together as a region to secure more funding that will advance the regional goals. Also, to continue our work to improve our climate analysis tools to inform decision-making as we go forward into the future. And then also specific work related to finalizing the regional mobility policy that is also a part of this plan to be finalized and used at the local level to support local transportation system plan updates and other land use decisions in the future. Next slide. In addition, I do want to take a moment to just acknowledge your leadership and hard work over the past 2 years, your staff, the council office, the COO office, but also all of the team that is shown here on this slide. This has been a big effort of Metro, in addition to our jurisdictional partners. I just really want to thank all of the staff that have been working very hard over the past 2 years to get to this point. Next slide. The ordinance before you, 23-1496, in effect adopts the 2023 Regional Transportation Plan as recommended by JPAC earlier this month. It directs staff to make the changes that are part of the specific changes that are recommended based on the public feedback that we've received to date. Also to prepare a final plan and analysis that reflects all of those changes, and that we would then submit the final plan to our state and federal agencies. And for federal purposes, upon adoption by the Metro Council, it does become effective immediately for federal purposes. But we will submit the plan as adopted to the Land Conservation and Development Commission as required under state law. Next slide. So with that, I will hand it over to Ally to provide her presentation on the high-capacity transit strategy. You don't need to turn it on. Oh, I don't.
Thank you. Thank you, Kim. So thank you so much for having me here. I am excited to be here today to present on this action item for the high-capacity transit strategy. This is also the culmination of almost 2 years of our work together, and so I want to briefly highlight that before going over the action itself. I should have a couple slides. Yes, perfect. Next slide, please. So really, we started this work looking at creating a stronger backbone for transit and transportation in the region through high-capacity transit, really building from the framework provided by the 2040 growth concept, and really also leveraging a key point in time around a lot of opportunities with regional work, partner priorities, federal funding, and a lot of other elements. Next slide, please. We were careful to coordinate our approach with the 2023 Regional Transportation Plan update, and so our key 4 milestones here were really coordinated with that plan. Next slide, please. We also are really thankful to all of our partners that worked with us on this effort. There was a project management team with staff from across Metro and TriMet that worked on this effort. We also had a working group made up of staff from throughout the region that was really key in providing feedback. And also we had about quarterly touch points with both the county coordinating committees and the Metro's advisory committees as well. Next slide, please. And for meaningful community feedback, we worked with the RTP to have coordinated contracts with community-based organizations to really make sure that we were representing the voices of communities that are marginalized and reliant on transit. And so we paired that as well with other broader efforts like online surveys, tabling events in coordination with TriMet, and other efforts like meetings and group interviews. Next slide, please. Together, we expanded the role for high-capacity transit in the region, going beyond just connecting these centers to the central city, but connecting those regional centers to each other and major town centers as well. Next slide, please. And we also defined the elements that make transit high capacity and did some work also to make sure that we were identifying the types of elements that would make these investments successful. Next slide, please. And that work fed into updating our transit spectrum, which really includes all of the tools for realizing our transit vision. And we also did work to differentiate between high-capacity transit and the role for better and frequent bus. Next slide, please. And this was really the crux of our work, developing the regional vision for high-capacity transit and a pipeline to help us realize that vision, really making us competitive for federal funding and also creating a framework for investments in the future. Next slide, please. And part of the way that we get there is we created a plan for shared action to really actualize transit supportive environments to ensure those investments are successful. Next slide, please. And creating the pathway so that we could work to make those investments in corridors that are ready today and also at the same time grow corridors for investment in the future. Next slide, please. And so that brings us to today and today's action. Today's action is a Resolution 23-5348 for the purpose of adopting the 2023 High Capacity Transit Strategy. Next slide, please. And this includes the items that were previewed at the meeting earlier this month. So that includes the resolution language itself and a staff report supporting the packet, as well as Exhibit A, which was the high capacity transit strategy released for public review, and then the recommended changes to create the adopted strategy. And these were recommended for approval by both MPAC and JPAC. Next slide, please. And so this is the last step in the adoption process today. And so council is being asked to consider those recommendations and public testimony before taking action on the resolution. Next slide, please. And just before I end, I wanted to mention a few things about moving forward, which we did preview earlier this month, but two things in particular came up during the adoption process. One being making sure that we are thinking about transit solutions in areas that are lacking service today, and the second being really focusing on funding. I did want to mention in Chapter 8 of the Regional Transportation Plan, we have outlined activities towards both of those efforts. We have applied for a grant to be doing some additional work around funding for Rapid Bus as part of the implementation plan. And then the Connecting First and Last Mile study work will be looking at solutions for areas lacking transit, new growth areas, and other areas, including funding, also governance, and a number of other things. So we look forward to starting that work early next year. Next slide, please. And thank you very much for having me again. And President Peterson, I'll turn it back to you.
Thank you. So, councilors, we have opportunity for conversation later. Right now, we're going into our public hearing for ordinance number 23-1496 and resolution number 23-5348. Thank you, staff, so much. We'll probably have you come back up for questions later, so thank you. I will now open that public hearing. Connor, will you please describe to the audience our procedures for the public hearing?
Yes, thank you, President Peterson. So if anyone wishes to testify on ordinance number 23-1496 or resolution number 23-5348, now is the time to do so. Public testimony will be limited to 3 minutes, and I'll manage a timer to go off the 3-minute mark. Once again, if you've not signed up to speak, you can do so now. If you're joining us in person, you can fill out one of the blue cards in the back of the room and bring that up to me. If you're joining us on Zoom, you can sign up by hitting the raise hand button, which depending on your version of Zoom is either at the bottom of your screen or within the reactions tab. For those joining on Zoom, I will promote you up to a full panelist, so I'll call your name. You'll see a window pop up asking you to accept that promotion. Once you do so, you'll rejoin and be able to turn on your camera and unmute yourself. As a reminder to everybody testifying today, you do not need to give your physical address. However, please do identify yourself for the record before testifying. And once again, the mics up here do not need to be turned on. They will be on automatically, but feel free to move it closer to you if needed. So with that, President Peterson, councilors, we have had some folks sign up in advance today. There was also some written testimony that was distributed to you all last night. So we will start with those who have signed up in advance before moving on to those raising their hand today. So first up, we have Diane Meisenhelter. So your time will begin when you begin speaking, Diane. And you don't need to mute or unmute the mics. It's on.
Okay. So in the midst of a worsening climate emergency, when we must drastically and quickly reduce emissions, this RTP is a plan for the past, still car and roadway centered instead of what we desperately need for safe and sustainable transportation this critical decade and beyond. It looks, on the surface, it looks good or sounds good, but the details are in the budgets, as we all know. And there's a doubling of funds for roadway expansion and the cutting of transit investment to a third of the previous plan, with a comparatively small amount for alternative or active transportation. It seems that the hundreds of public comments demanding more funds for safety improvements and clean transportation options were ignored with only minor changes. Metro acknowledged the inaccuracy of their 2018 modeling on what were to become record high emissions and rising fatalities, yet used the same modeling in this RTP. Thus, we have little confidence of meeting climate and safety goals. There is an excellent graphic on induced demand, which results in higher emissions as well as accident levels. Yet the plan continues to propose to spend our acknowledged limited regional funds on roadway expansions instead of earmarking them to address climate and safety concerns. In constrained projects, the RTP could have taken a stronger stance, insisting that regional funds be designated only for the clean transit and safety parts of certain projects. Or under state law, Metro could demand audits of road expansions to make ODOT or others justify both costs and added emissions. Not all of the prioritized expansion projects are constrained. Some prioritized projects demand explanation, given that only half of the roadway projects offer a safety benefit to any user. An example being the airport access, which is not that problematic and yet prioritized over safety issues clearly identified in other parts of the region. This RFP rightfully acknowledges its own failures in terms of equity, safety targets, job access by transit, and emissions, but fails to take an active voice in creating strong, in proposing and committing to strong potential solutions, levels of regional investment and the like, by passing the buck and pointing to needed state changes in transportation revenue mechanisms. This passive voice does little to ensure change at the state level, nor does it leverage Metro's power as the largest regional governmental entity that can have a strong impact in pressing for better state, local, and regional solutions. Transportation advocates are disappointed in this plan and want you to have the courage to revisit it.
Thank you. And if we could call up 4 at a time, I think that would be.
Oh, sorry?
I think if you could call it 4 at a time.
4 at a time, okay.
Yeah.
Great. Well, we have Jennifer Kroll up next. And then we have Michaela McCormick, Mark DeRienzo, and Lynn Handlin. All right. Jennifer, you'll have 3 minutes, and your time will begin when you begin speaking.
Sure. President Peterson, councilors, thank you for the opportunity to comment on the draft regional transportation plan. My name is Dr. Jennifer Kroll. I'm an ecologist living in Eastmoreland in District 6. I want to thank you for the difficult and important work you do. Some may scoff at government, but I hold service like yours for the public good in the absolute highest regard. I appreciate the zillion moving parts and interested parties that you're juggling here. I am here today because I love this world, with all its strange and wonderful creatures, and all of you. As a scientist, I know what is coming because of climate change, and I'm terrified. This plan covers 2024 to 2028. By the end of that period, we will be at the end of the window of time we have to make changes necessary to keep us and our children alive. The only way we can keep our planet safe is with an all-hands-on-deck emergency mode approach. The US did this for World War II. We have the means and ability. We are in a climate emergency. Our house is on fire. Portland could model for the world how to do this. On page 2-3, the plan lists climate leadership as a desired outcome. But this is not a leadership plan, and you know this yourselves. The plan lists the feedback you've received from the public, so you know that what we're saying is not news to you. The plan strategy rates the section "Make streets and highways safe, reliable, and connected" as having the lowest climate benefit, And yet this plan calls for huge spending efforts on streets and highways. We don't have visibility into what percentage of that investment actually improves safety for pedestrians, bicycles, or transit riders, and anything beyond that is just enabling fossil fuel consumption. As a scientist, I am telling you that it is too late for a plan like this. Our children deserve a living world. I urge you to take bold emergency action. Divert all discretionary funding to transit. Say no to constrained funds that require construction of new roads or lanes. Be bold as if your children's life depends on it, because it does. Thank you.
Thank you. We now have Michaela McCormick and Ben Stevenson. You could come up and take a seat.
Good morning, councilors. I'm here in strong opposition to the RTP that the council seems all too ready to approve. The climate crisis we face demands that we shift as soon as possible to sustainable modes of transportation, prioritizing electric mass transit, bicycles, and walking. While we get daily reports of the massive and growing devastation caused by fossil fuels and CO2 emissions, our local government, including this council, persists in funding and facilitating the expansion of roads used mostly by private fossil-fueled vehicles. While your plan will approve $3.1 billion for roadway expansions and $3.15 billion for thruway expansions over the next 7 years alone, it will provide only $1 billion in capital improvements to public transit, compared to $3.2 billion in the 2018 plan. We need to reverse those allocations so that the portions going to mass transit and other sustainable modes of transportation dwarf that going to the infrastructure for private fossil-fueled vehicles. The Fifth National Climate Assessment reported that the 2021 Pacific Northwest heat dome, responsible for over 1,000 deaths, was 40 to 150 times more likely to occur due to climate change. Anyone who reads the periodic climate change projections of the UN's Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, which are more and more dire with each revision, or the City of Portland's 2020 Climate Emergency Work Plan, which the city is failing to implement, knows we have to make an about face, such as I describe, with our transportation systems now. Our elected and appointed decision makers, including you, who are charged with acting in the health and safety interests of your constituents and the whole community, continue to rubber stamp the short-sighted, greedy agendas of the fossil fuel and auto industries and those they've bought off. It's obvious in reading your plan that you are counting on the tolling of private vehicles and growing sales of low-emissions vehicles to adequately mitigate climate change. The fact is that the number of low-emissions vehicles on the road is decreasing. You need to listen to the science, heed the increasingly dire warnings, and do the right thing. Support, advocate for, and direct funds into safe, sustainable, and affordable transportation. Thanks.
Thank you. We now have Mark DiRienzo, and on deck is Lynn Handlin.
Well, thank you very much for the opportunity to testify. My name is Mark DiRienzo. Metro's next regional transportation plan should be planning for a safer, cleaner, habitable future. Instead, it is doubling new roadway spending and cutting transit investment to a third of the last plan. Many groups have criticized the plan and suggested improvements towards more sustainable transportation and safety improvements, but were ignored. We're in the middle of a climate crisis, and we must drastically reduce emissions. The plan for car-centric roadways comes at a bad time. 3 major highway expansion projects will get the go-ahead despite their documented and substantial environmental and health impacts. Only half of Metro's planned roadway projects offer a safety benefit to any user. This plan openly admits its past safety needs projections were wrong, yet does little for bike, pedestrian, and safe road improvements. Metro's own report explains that adding lanes results in more people driving and driving farther, resulting in increased emissions and crashes. In conclusion, Metro needs to really seriously rethink the regional plan with respect to reducing carbon emissions and increasing public safety. Thank you very much.
Thank you. We now have Lynn Handlin and John Giacoppi. You could come up and take a seat, as well as Aaron Keene. But Lynn, your time will begin when you begin speaking.
Hi, thank you, Metro Council. And my name is Lynn Handlin. I'm District 2. And I am here with Extinction Rebellion. And according to your own estimates, this plan fails, and fails. It fails in terms of equity, it fails in terms of safety, and it definitely fails miserably in terms of climate. It fails to boldly address the climate crisis, a crisis which, as you all know, is accelerating faster than many believed, and we have very little time left to avert the worst impacts. We certainly don't have 5 more years before we reconsider and start fixing it. We need to do that now. For starters, you can cancel the ODOT's incredibly expensive climate fueling Rose Quarter freeway expansion billed as safety and operations, but it will not increase safety and will increase emissions from more cars due to induced demand. I know you all know this. You know it's a fail. You know the right thing to do is to ditch this costly, unsafe freeway expansion and all the other expensive freeway expansions. We don't need more freeways. In terms of safety, while there's some good safety improvements in the plan, it does not do nearly enough, especially in terms of walking and biking. According to the plan, barely half of the near-term road and bridge projects come with a safety benefit. And that benefit is primarily for people in cars, not so much for pedestrians and bicyclists. We need more money for safe walking and biking, including shade trees. Part of why people died during the heat dome was a lack of trees on the streets, and a lot of that is because of transportation. According to this plan, the mode split goals will not be met. Transportation infrastructure is built in a way that avoids impacts on key habitat and results in better environmental conditions for wildlife and native vegetation, according to your plan. Nice words, but there's no evidence of this. The past history has been terrible for outer Southeast Portland, and for the future, the I-5 expansion is gonna just devastate the environment around it. That just went out the window. I know that you all must care about climate and safety and social justice, so I'm going to assume that all of you are gonna follow the science, follow what the public is calling for. And as a memorial outside says, you know the right thing, now do the right thing. And the right thing is to be the climate leaders that you want to be and vote down this plan and come up with a plan for the future, a livable future, not this plan. Thanks.
Okay, we now have Ben Stevenson, and on deck is Joe Courtwright, who will be joining us virtually. John Giacoppi and Harlan Schober could come take seats.
Good morning, President Peterson and councilors. My name is Ben Stevenson. I'm a recent graduate of Cleveland High School and a longtime Portland resident. I want to thank each of you for allowing me the opportunity to speak today about the proposed RTP. And so I was reading through the plan and researching his testimony, and I was initially really encouraged. Appendix J reads, quote, "Climate change is the defining challenge of this century. And the goals and the vision, mobility, safety, equity, economy, climate, are really excellent. But when the rubber hits the road, unfortunately, I really have to echo the concerns of everybody who's already spoken about the climate, transit, safety, and mobility inaction of this plan. And for this reason, I think we should oppose this plan and work towards a better version." So I want to read some quotes from the RTP, the executive summary on pages 18 and 25. Quote, "The RTP does not meet the region's targets to triple transit, walking, and bicycling mode share," end quote. Quote, "Driving currently offers much better access to jobs than transit does, and the RTP does not change this," end quote. Those were both page 18. Page 25, quote, "The RTP is not maintaining progress toward the 2035 Vision Zero goal," end quote. I think we should sit with this for a moment. because it's really easy to think we have to press forward, we have to take action. But this is $69 billion of a plan, $24 billion of new capital improvements. And I do not believe we should be investing that money in a plan that does not even come close to our safety, mobility, and climate goals. While improvements are made, the quotes that I read don't just fall short of these mode share goals, of replacing driving goals, safety goals. In many of these cases, it doesn't even come halfway to meeting these goals. And the plan itself warns of the consequences of disinvestment in transit and pedestrian infrastructure. Appendix J reads, quote, "Lack of investment in needed transportation infrastructure will result in falling short of our emissions reduction goal," end quote. But this is exactly what the RTP does. It really doesn't line up. And so let's put that quote in real terms instead of technocratic ones. The inaction of the RTP sitting in front of us denies our present reality. It denies the need for pressing safety improvements as pedestrian deaths skyrocket. It denies the need for public transit improvements, as previous testifiers have spoken to and has been widely expressed in public comment and reports from groups like the Street Trust. The inaction of the RTP on public transit denies the climate emergency, as its own climate section admits. And so I encourage each of you to oppose the current RTP, and I believe we should hold on to hope that we can build something better. And we may think it's too late to change course, it's too late to do a new plan, but what's really gonna be too late is 5 more years of insufficient action on pedestrian safety, on mobility improvements, and on the climate crisis. I thank you for your time.
Thank you. Okay, next up we have Joe Courtwright, who is joining us online, and on deck is John Giacoppi. So Joe, you should be able to turn on your camera and unmute yourself. You'll have 3 minutes, and your time will begin when you begin speaking.
Thank you. For the record, Joe Courtwright. I am Director of City Observatory and an economist in Portland. A decade ago, you enacted your climate smart strategy and committed us to a strategy to meet our greenhouse gas reduction goals. Sadly, if we look back over the last decade, we're failing to meet those goals. Transportation greenhouse gases have not decreased as that plan called for, but are increasing. By 3 separate estimates, they're either increasing 1%, 3%, or 5% per year since the adoption of the climate smart strategy. In that strategy, you committed to continually monitor our progress, and if we weren't making progress, to take further steps. And I just want to point out, it isn't that we're not making progress quickly enough, we're actually going in the wrong direction. Transportation greenhouse gases are increasing. And we're not monitoring that. There's nothing in the RTP that acknowledges that greenhouse gases are increasing and that our plan is failing. And what that means is we're not taking the steps we need that we've committed to move forward. And what I want to do is, what your staff has done is said that, well, don't worry, our models show that we'll be fine in the future. But we know that the models are wrong. They've been wrong in the past. And they also include fundamentally flawed assumptions about the age of vehicles. They're much older than people are hanging onto them longer, and they're much dirtier, and they're much more SUVs. We're simply not making the progress that we need. And then also in the RTP, there is a flat out contradiction in terms of estimates of how much traveling we'll be doing in the region. Right now, we travel about 20 million miles per day in this region. If you look at Appendix I, your performance measures in the RTP, which are the rationale for the investments that you're making, it says that number is going to increase from 20 million to 25 million. Your climate analysis, on the other hand, in Appendix J, the very next part of the RTP, says that vehicle miles traveled will be held steady at 20 million miles per day, and that's how we'll achieve our climate objectives. Your RTP technical analysis is simply fraudulent. You can't have it both ways. You're planning for a big increase in driving and rationalizing, as people have pointed out, several billion-dollar-a-mile highway widening projects. And at the same time asserting that somehow we're going to achieve our climate goals. And it's clear that the Appendix J and the climate analysis is simply greenhouse gaslighting of the public. The RTP is a cover-up for continued auto-dominated transportation policy. And moreover, it's out of compliance with state land use requirements, the LCDC requirements, and more broadly, the state's greenhouse gas reduction goals. We've already squandered a decade in which we could have been investing in a more climate-friendly transportation system. Don't let this RTP squander another decade. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, we now have John Giacoppi. Up on deck is Aaron Keene, and Jacob Apenes could come up and take a seat.
All right. Thank you very much for taking the time to have audience with us today. In the fight for a livable future, there has been nothing more exhausting than the endless abdication of responsibility of those in power. I've been studying this RTP as much as I possibly can over the last 2 months. I've found a lot of contradictory answers. I've found a lot of information that seemingly led to dead ends. It's been hard to pin down who is ultimately responsible for compiling the assembled project list, who has the ability to strike line items from this project list, how we can prioritize our money effectively. It has been very difficult to get these answers. I understand this is not fundamentally Metro's fault, but I think Metro needs to understand here that there is a clear absence of regulation. We've discussed this RTP at length, and more people will talk about the problems with the RTP, and I will let them do that. But the underlying problem here is we do not have a regulator in this space. Localities can build a 5-lane highway that runs through a residential neighborhood and will kill children, and no one can stop them, or no one chooses to, I should say. People who ostensibly have some level of power to at least make this a difficult process, to make this a painful process, choose instead to abet this procedure, to allow it to happen, in fact, to enable it to happen, rather than using whatever power they do have to slow this process down. That cannot continue. This will fundamentally hamper our land use goals. It will obviously destroy our climate goals, and it will worsen our safety crisis. Our own RTP acknowledges that we have been enacting a Vision Zero campaign for 4 years, and we have seen negative progress. More people are dying, and there are no proposed changes. There are not even discussions of what proposed changes could be. Your RTP, even if it's planning nothing, even if it has no concrete steps taken in it for whatever reason, could at least suggest a possible avenue to increase our road safety, and yet it does not. We obviously and clearly need a regulator here. You have the ability to prioritize projects based on many progressive goals, but the only one that you actually use to prioritize projects on a line item basis is throughway reliability, which is to say traffic efficiency. The only prioritization criteria that you apply applies only to cars. That's unacceptable. If you're willing to apply any criteria, ostensibly you could apply more. You clearly have the capacity to apply one and the authority and mandate to. You are applying it. So why don't you apply other ones? Well, I'm told you don't have the authority to. How does that make any sense? I've not been able to get a clear answer on that. And I also don't see how you're able to grant an exemption to any project included in the RTP from the the sustainable communities and whatever. I can't find it and I'm running out of time. I'm stressed. What I'm saying here is this. We need a regulator in this space. Metro is poised to be that regulator. What power do you need and how do you need it delivered to you to accomplish this goal? Tell us and we will seek that power for you. But we need someone here, and we cannot just go on creating yet another agency that lacks the manpower to achieve its goals. We need you to step up. Thank you.
We now have Aaron Keene. On deck is Harlan Schober, and Abby Griffith could come up and take a seat.
Thank you, Council President and councilors. My name is Aaron Keene. I'm representing Bike Loud today, speaking about the RTP. So I know what you're thinking, all these people wearing red and these climate activists. It's too late. It's November 30th, right? Today's the day to celebrate, to land the plane for this plan that we worked so hard on. And I know that you worked hard on it. I watched each of you work very hard on this. I watched everybody at Metro work hard on this. So why did it fail, right? Why isn't it meeting its goals? Its goals for equity, its goals for climate, its goals for safety. Well, it seems like it's the process, right? So I told these people outside that there is time. There's always time for the climate. There's always time for equity. There's always time for safety, all right? And I know one of the things that got me very excited was something that just happened 2 weeks ago. JPACT, which a bunch of you are on that committee, put recommendations forward to Metro to recognize and to deal with these problems, the problems with the project list. The RTP plan itself is pretty fantastic, but the project list really falls short. All right? So I know you're probably familiar with what those recommendations are, and we don't have to go through them right now, but they're about the process. So the public is coming here, they're complaining now, because they had 45 days to look at this plan. 2 months before the plan was due, right? In a 5-year process. In a 5-year process where 3 of those years are spent doing nothing, right? 45 days over 5 years. So are we going to change the process? Are we going to bring the public in earlier? Are we going to change the ways that we're evaluating these projects? As JPAC recommends, as you recommend? I hope so. Thank you.
Thank you. We now have Harlan Schober, and on deck is Jacob Apines.
Good morning. We're hearing, all I could say is what she said, what he said. There have been real articulate people talking to you this morning. The worry for me is that somehow we can't bring that perspective to bear in this matter. And so Metro seems to be stuck in a position of, at best, doing the wrong thing very well. I don't understand the professional and career pressures you are all under. I admit I don't understand that. But we seem to be rushing toward a bad conclusion. It seems like we all know better than this. An earlier speaker talked about the World War II level of commitment, where like an all hands on deck period where things could happen fast, decisions could get made, production could be redirected in what was then the felt need of the time. And with the climate catastrophe bearing down on us, a bigger and better Robert Moses era obsolete plan for transportation is the wrong thing to do. So, as another speaker said this morning, just slow it down. We don't have to do the wrong thing to stay on schedule. But this doesn't hit any of your targets, and your document acknowledges that. So I'm arguing against this plan. Thank you.
Thank you. We now have Jacob Apines. Apology if I'm getting that wrong. And on deck is Abby Griffith. And Art Llewellyn and Madeline Lynn could take seats.
Cool. Hello, Metro Council. For the record, my name is Jacob Apines. I'm 25 years old, a lifelong resident of Portland, and a member of Sunrise PDX. I don't own a car. My ways of getting around the city are by bike, bus, and by foot. I feel this regional transportation plan proposed today does not effectively meet the needs of myself or the 1/3 of all Portlanders who cannot or do not drive. With almost double the funding for roadway projects and 1/3 of the funding for transit projects compared to the previous RTP, I can't help but worry that we're going in the wrong direction. The regional body that focuses so much on equity, accessibility, and sustainability is no longer working to champion these values. I know Metro isn't the entity designing these projects contained in this RTP. I know that cities and communities propose these projects, and Metro ultimately adds these projects to the RTP. But if the outcomes of this process is an increase in car infrastructure year over year, don't you think the process needs to evolve? Don't you think the process needs to include and enforce metrics related to equity, accessibility, and sustainability so we ensure that projects meet the needs of the people? It sounds like it does, but we're not doing that. So we can ensure that the public input prioritizing equitable transportation is not overruled by comments maintaining car-oriented infrastructure. In my volunteer work as an outreach lead at Sunrise PDX, I spend a lot of time canvassing neighborhoods, asking people for their transportation needs and concerns. In my experience, as we've moved our canvassing farther east towards neighborhoods near 82nd Avenue, we're seeing 2 patterns emerge. 1, neighbors will share that they drive everywhere, don't have any problems with our system, and don't have any concerns. Or 2, neighbors will share that they drive everywhere, but there's too much traffic, and would love to see improvements to reduce traffic along I-205 and 82nd. These comments are great. It's always good to hear from the community. But if for every 10 comments about car infrastructure, we receive just one comment asking for more bike lanes or more frequent bus service, is it appropriate to charge 10 times the funding for car infrastructure as opposed to transit and bike infrastructure? Is it crucial to prioritize inequitable, inaccessible, and unsustainable transportation projects because that's what we're used to? I hope you use your power today to vote no on this proposed RTP. I hope you use your power to rework the plan so we can build a system that is equitable, accessible, and sustainable. Thank you.
Thank you. We now have Abby Griffith, and on deck is Art Llewellyn.
My name is Rebecca Dempsey. I'm reading for Abby Griffith, who cannot be here today. She is a BIPOC, disabled bus rider, and an amazing community organizer. These are her words. Hello, my name is Abby Griffith, and I am the Bus Riders Unite community organizer. Our community will be safer if we prioritize improving public transit instead of expanding the road infrastructure. Therefore, we should halt road expansion projects and redirect our investments toward public transit. A public transit system that is more frequent, safer, and fareless will be far more advantageous than accommodating more cars on the road. When we expand roads, we inadvertently promote increased car usage, discouraging people from utilizing public transit. As the Bus Riders Unite community organizer, I constantly hear from our community that we are in dire need of an enhanced transit system. It's important that the decision makers listen to the voices of the community. Kind regards, Abby Griffith, pronouns she, her, Bus Riders Unite community organizer, Opal Environmental Justice, Oregon. Thank you.
Thank you. We now have Art Llewellyn, and on deck is Madeline Lynn.
Good afternoon. My name is Art Llewellyn. I'm a frequent commenter here at Metro and other agencies, City Council, over the years. I've been an advocate for light rail and better transit all this time and submitted materials. And I've come to believe that you don't care what the public has to say. You care what the people who you pay to do the work, and they will tell you what they think you want to hear. So I've been through this way too many times. Submitting material for consideration, it's just flatly ignored. I will stand in favor of projects if they meet standards, high standards. None of the projects that you have in town on the table now meet high standards. In fact, they're dangerous. I-5 Rose Corridor, Columbia River Crossing, Southwest Corridor Max Extension, terrible proposal, worst I've ever seen. First on my list of metrics to determine support is public safety. The hazards, the traffic hazards that are inherent in the projects as proposed, should be reflected in the accident rating, both in terms of number of accidents and their severity, and it's not. You're not telling the public what they should be hearing about whether these projects are worth doing or not. You just smile. I was standing out here with a sign that said, "Recall Lynn Peterson," for any motorist would see it. I'm not calling for you to be a recall. I'm calling for your resignation immediately. And face criminal charges involved in a federal investigation of this agency, ODOT, WashDOT, PBOT, TriMet, for the lousy, incompetent, blatantly so incompetent corruption cannot be ruled out. You're putting people's lives at stake and saying, oh, if the accident rate goes up, we'll find some way to bury it in the statistics. If you have the capacity that goes from 10 to 20% greater, and the accident rate only goes up 5%, that's less accidents, right? That's the way I think you would hide your incompetence. Corruption is more like I charge you with, and I want your resignation. I want a story about how badly these projects are engineered. The Columbia River Crossing project, this Rose Corridor, the Southwest Corridor project, the plans for TriMet, The standard bus doesn't convert to electric very well, neither does the yellow school bus, neither does the paratransit lift vans. You're getting away with murder. I'm demanding your resignation, Ms. Peterson.
We now have Madeline Lin, and on deck is Indy Namkoon.
Hi, my name is Madeline. I just moved here about a year ago from Modesto, California. And in pursuit of a career, I decided to live alone. And upon that decision, I realized that, I can't afford to live alone here in Portland if I have a car. And my car had been torn apart. It got hit while it was parked, and I couldn't pay for the towing. It just turned into a myriad of debt that I had to adopt coming here. So I decided, hey, Portland's all about biking, right? I should just sell my car and bike around everywhere. I'm finding that it is not as easy as it is laid out to be and that Metro claims it is to be. And hearing about this RTP plan is very upsetting to me because I've created an entire plan around using the public transit and using the bike lanes that Portland seems to be so proud of. It would bring me a lot of dismay to see all of that be dismantled by continued freeway construction that I see a lot in Beaverton. That's where I started out here, and that is not the vision I had moving here to Portland. I thought it was all about green spaces, and like my colleague John was saying, I think that it's important that we are able to see these plans and have it be more transparent and an entity that is regulating how these plans are implemented. I would like to see that this plan get voted down and considered more further, because I think it's clear to see that this has sprung up a lot of emotions from people based on the logistics. So there's still time to consider a better plan for Portland and its people. Thank you.
Thank you. We now have Indy Namkoon, and on deck is Brett Morgan.
Good morning, councilors. Thank you for the opportunity to testify today. My name is Indy Namkoon. I'm the Transportation Justice Coordinator for Verde. I'm a community rep on TPAC, and my organization also partnered with Metro to engage community members in the Cully neighborhood where we're based. I want to highlight some of the ambitious elements I think are really worth celebrating in this RTP update. We're unbundling $1.2 billion of ODOT safety funding, creating more transparency and accountability for how limited resources are being directed to our most urgent safety needs on the system. We're making plans to reform the call for projects and ensure that future RTP updates actually deliver on the potential of our regional vision and goals and policy. We're creating substantial accountability measures to hold ODOT to its commitments around price projects in the metro area. We're doing work to address faulty assumptions baked into the climate analysis, both at the regional level and taking that up to the state. We've created a new mobility policy that we believe is going to deliver better safety, mobility, and climate outcomes for communities across the region for years to come. And I would particularly want to note that 4 out of those 5 elements I just mentioned weren't in the plan as it was written when I joined TPAC last winter. These were priorities raised up by advocates, community members, and local leaders that you all at Metro took seriously and that our committees chose to integrate into the final plan. That should happen every day, but it really, really doesn't. And I've deeply appreciated the availability, honesty, and responsiveness we've received from you as counselors, from your staff, as community advocates throughout this process. There are many things worth celebrating in this update and many things left to do. Many, many people here this morning and throughout the process have raised outstanding concerns that I share around the misalignment of mega projects with our regional policies, around accountability for the results we'll actually see on the ground in our neighborhoods. The actions laid out on this plan to resolve these concerns are opportunities but not guarantees, not without sustained commitment from each of you and your staff to seeing implementation through MTIP updates, the next call for projects and beyond. Today, I am encouraging you to approve this plan and the high-capacity transit strategy, not because of an absence of concern, but because I think we have a better shot at resolving our greatest challenges with these changes than without them. If you've seen and heard what I have throughout this process, it should be clear that there is a huge appetite in your constituents for Metro to be a leader and a champion for the safe, clean, equitable system our region needs. So as you implement this plan and other recommended actions, I hope you will choose day after day to step up to that plate. So let's make sure that when we're back here 5 years from now, we're not saying the same things and facing the same problems. We will be watching closely. And we'll also be here as a resource and a partner as we discover the new challenges yet to come. Thank you.
Thank you. We now have Brett Morgan, and on deck is Sarah Iannarone. As a reminder, if you've not already signed up to speak, you can do so now, either by filling out one of the blue cards in the back of the room or raising your hand on Zoom.
Thank you. For the record, my name is Brett Morgan, and I'm a resident of Helvetia, just outside of the urban growth boundary, and I work as the transportation director for 1,000 Friends of Oregon. I'm here to speak in favor of the RTP and the high-capacity transit strategy, which 1,000 Friends has been engaged with through the Getting There Together coalition, which you've heard from today through other members. I specifically want to explicitly want to make a connection on how the RTP connects to land use, because sometimes I think this gets missed in the grand consideration of all the functions that Metro has to complete. Specifically, the RTP is one component, and along with the urban growth boundaries, housing work, and other components that Metro must consider regionally. And 1,000 Friends is engaged in this work because we want to support smart growth that helps preserve our working lands, farms, forests that we're proud to have on the edge of our urban growth boundary and are reliant upon. So, that being said, do we think that the RTP is perfect? No. I think everyone in this room shares some sentiment that there's more work, more refinement, and opportunity to improve. But following this process for the better part of a year through MTAC, JPAC, MPAC, the various committees that all the jurisdictions have to work for, it's clear that Metro staff and the council has worked really hard to bridge some of the concerns that have been brought forward to this date. I also want to admit that if the RTP does feel contradictory, it's because at its core, some elements are. There's not core state alignment or local alignment when we look at transportation policies or investments. And that needs to be the continued focus of our energy as we move forward into the next year, especially as we focus on a 2025 transportation package. I specifically want to speak in favor of the project scrutiny as a tool that will help refine the 2028 RTP and will be the core focus, I think, as you continue to carry this work through your staff, through the public engagement, and so on. These filters will help improve the types of projects that actually end up on the RTP projects list and help deal with some of the concerns that are being raised in the public today. I also just want to call out in support of how the major policy updates give Metro more teeth to implement and look at how we're going to pull through safety, climate, and equity considerations in the project list considerations. So overall, thank you for your time and consideration and hard work on the RTP. I know a lot of balancing act goes into this, and I want to reiterate again, it is a partner, and the RTP is just as much a process owned by the local governments and through the JPAC process and so on. So I think continuing to engage our local communities, our cities, our counties, and other folks about how we want to have this work come through and how we want to align our climate goals is a really important focus for the next couple of years as we move towards the 2028 RTP. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, we now have Sarah Iannarone. So Sarah, you should have just had that window pop up to promote you. And on deck is Laura Feldman, who will also be joining online. All right, Sarah, you'll have 3 minutes and your time will begin when you begin speaking.
Good morning. Thank you, everyone, for taking the time and care to be here today. I want to say, first off, thank you to Metro Council for advancing a plan with some key policies of which you should be very proud, including the mobility policy, which has come a long way since our first discussion draft back in April 2021. And we do applaud the region for moving beyond level of service as the mobility standard. We're also glad to see the pricing policy intact here. Sure, the program would look very different if Metro were administering the region's congestion pricing program instead of the state. And forgive me for being here remotely today, but I'm actively working on testimony and organizing for multiple town halls on tolling in the region happening this Saturday. And I hope all of the climate activists in Portland will show up for that in support of equitably pricing the region's interstates and demanding that the state direct the toll proceeds to investments in transit and active transportation. It's a critical step in climate action that we can actively take. We have a path forward. I would be remiss to not thank Metro staff not only for their tireless work on the technical aspects of the plan, but for their tenacity and creativity in engaging the community and stakeholders in ways that are more robust and more equitable than most MPOs in the country. I know that through their support, we were able to engage majority, 94% BIPOC community members, and also 78% low-income community members through our engagement work, and really lift up their priorities and voices in that. And we're looking a lot forward to how the next RTP will grow even beyond what they were able to do. So big congratulations to staff, JPAC, TPAC, and all the committee members who work together to deliberate, prioritize, hone, and find consensus on some really challenging problems. I even want to thank Clackamas County. It's been a challenge, and we've seen folks who, at the state level, when there's disagreement, they walk away. But folks dug in and they worked together to kind of come to consensus here. And I think that's really important. And it's one of the best things that Metro has to share with our local communities as well as the state, which is why it matters when we come together in these lengthy deliberative processes to work through our issues. And even when we can't find straight consensus, we come up with pathways forward of how we're going to continue working together in the future. And I really want to congratulate folks for that, because I know it was really hard and there were a lot of feelings that were really challenged by how this plan was playing out. And I also want to echo Brett Morgan's sentiment here and Thousand Friends of how we can continue to focus on things like compact land uses and other investments that will make it more possible for us to bring transit and active transportation dreams to fruition all around the region. And finally, I do want to echo Indy's sentiments here from Verde, where she talked about how we can continue to engage communities meaningfully, double down on economic development strategies that really do create shared prosperity in our region, and look at the 2040 concept plan so that we can really think about all of the tools we can use to get our region on track with regard to reducing traffic fatalities, reducing VMT and GHG emissions, and ensuring we are making a truly great place for everyone, regardless of race, income, or zip code here. Thanks all for your hard work. We appreciate it, and we're here to support you moving into the future. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Next up, we have Laura Feldman, and if anybody else would like to testify after Laura, please go ahead and hit that raise hand button now.
Hello, everyone. Good morning. My name is Laura Feldman. I live in the Portsmouth neighborhood on the North Portland Peninsula, surrounded by all kinds of fossil fuel and chemical pollution sources. I breathe some of the worst air in the nation and am subject to a lower life expectancy than residents in other parts of the city. I'm a longtime cyclist, and for the first time in my 69 years of living in Portland, I am daunted by how dangerous and toxic it has become to ride, walk, simply be out in my community, impacted as we are by crime, the increase in traffic, speed limits not being enforced, roads not maintained and dangerous, and with an ineffective and expensive transit system, which people are never going to get out of their cars for. In short, an unlivable city. We are in the throes of a climate crisis. We are desperately in need of city, regional, state climate leadership. We need leaders who understand the past and its present and how we can adapt to move into a frightening and unpredictable future. It's not going to be easy, but it's made all the harder by leadership hell-bent on going backwards. In this case, planning to build more road surface for more cars that will be going away ultimately. I look upon Metro's 2023 Regional Transportation Plan to invest in freeway and road expansion while slashing investment in public transportation as the last nail in Portland's coffin, honestly. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. I will just wait another couple of seconds for anybody else on Zoom to either raise their hand or for anybody here in person to bring up a blue card. And seeing none, President Peterson.
Great, thank you. And with that, I will close the public hearing on both the ordinance and the resolution. And we will move on to questions for staff from the counselor. So why don't we come back up and all of you. Thank you. Counselors, this is our time to ask any final questions before we take a vote of staff. We can have statements later when we get into discussion. So why don't we just go ahead and open this up? And I guess I will just start with the first question. Could you just talk about state compliance? It's been raised a couple times and would love to get that on the record.
Great, thank you. Good morning, President Peterson and Council. Is it still morning? Yes. So yeah, I'm going to just say a couple things really quickly about legality. I'm Roger Alfred, Office of Metro Attorney, sorry. So there were some statements made about the plan not being consistent with state law. So I just wanted to let you know, we have reviewed it thoroughly and concluded that we are in compliance with state law. There's a memo in the packet for today that provides a lot more detail about that. And we have been working with the state agencies on this for the last couple of years, DLCD and ODOT, who are responsible for creating the targets that we have to comply with. So there's been a lot of coordination with those agencies, and we are comfortable that the methodologies that we have used do meet the standards as they are stated in state law. And then just by way of process going forward, the next step from here is that those state rules do require us to submit the climate portion of the plan to DLCD for review. And so there will be review by DLCD and probably LCDC of our compliance. And any member of the public that is interested in participating in that is free to do that also. So there could be another full level of engagement on the legality part at the state level after this is over.
Great, thank you. And obviously, compliance with the legal aspects is important, but it is not necessarily kind of the vision of where the region wants to go. So I just want to take it over to Catherine and talk about some of the things that we've talked about, is that this gets us partway where we want to go, but I feel like it's an acknowledgement of the region that there is more to do. Can you just talk about some of those more to do things that we expect to see? Because there are a lot of next steps here that the region has said, and I want to acknowledge the entirety of the region, from all of the voices from the edge all the way in of what they need to see in order to feel like multiple vague and conflicting goals can all be met as we move forward. So could you just kind of highlight some of those next steps?
I sure can. Thank you so much for the question, President Peterson. I think the place I would start is the processes of accountability that are already built into the draft. As projects move forward, the plan itself it's a little bit of a misnomer. It is a menu. It's not a funded plan. Each jurisdiction it identifies the available resources that it has to spend, and it proposes projects. Some of those projects Metro will help contribute local funds, regional funds to some of those projects. Those we will undoubtedly run through a pretty strong equity and climate filter that matches the values laid out in this plan. So a couple people mentioned regional funding, and that regional funding will absolutely skew toward biking, walking, transit, and safety projects. For other sorts of funded projects that receive federal funding, projects that have state funding, as they move forward, they need to go through what's called the MTIP process, as you all know, which is the process of moving into the implementation phase and getting adopted into having their funding sources adopted and moving forward. Those processes come both to JPACT and to you all as council, so there are accountability measures built in. And a number of the policies, which some of our testifiers alluded to, are really designed to make sure those projects are as climate friendly as they can be, that they emphasize safety, that they emphasize equity benefits. There is also a number of testifiers mentioned the mobility policy, and it sounds a little bit geeky, but it is one of the things that we see as moving forward really different about this plan. Historically, the way our region has made decisions about investment is based on moving vehicles, motor vehicles, faster and more efficiently, and that mobility policy adds other things into the equation. It adds safety into the equation, it adds accessibility into the equation, and it adds equity into the equation. So we'll be working with our partners to finalize those policies. And the last thing I would say, a number of people mentioned the sort of disconnect between the policies and the projects and asked for a tighter connection between those. And that is something that staff will be working on, but we'll also be working at JPACT because those local jurisdictions are our partners in this process. And we all need to just take a good hard look at how we're making our policies real and how we're applying that in an accountability sense as we move projects forward. That all promises to be some hard decisions, honestly, coming forward in the coming years. But we appreciate your leadership and we appreciate the testimony here to remind us all that it's critically important.
Thank you. Thank you. All right, Councilor questions. Councilor Rosenthal, Lewis, Gonzalez, Juan.
Thank you, Madam President. Just a comment before I make the question. The comment is, we heard some comments about process, and we all understand from your slide that it's a complex process that involves TPAC and JPAC and MPAC and the council and a whole bunch of public stakeholder involvement. But I think it perhaps is not fully understood if we were to, at this point in time, reject the RTP. Could you review the process that would happen if that happened and the complexities and the time constraints that would be involved in that?
Thank you, Councilor, for that question. I'm going to turn that question over to Kim to start with, and Roger may want to weigh in as well.
Thank you. Thank you for the question, Council President Peterson, Council. So the current plan that we have in place that was adopted in 2018 expires on December 6th. So if Council does not approve this plan, it would be not acting to approve it, but sending it back to JPAC for additional work. And we would not be able to complete that work before the current plan expires. When the current plan expires for federal purposes, that means federal transportation dollars cannot come to the region, so we would lose funding that was already programmed or that eligibility to apply for project funding. And it also would mean that projects that are undergoing a planning process or need some sort of federal action from the U.S. Department of Transportation, those projects would not be eligible to receive those decisions until we had an adopted plan that is in place for federal purposes.
If I might, just a quick follow-up question, a clarifying question. My understanding is that the Metro Council would have to come up with some idea, some consensus of what changes it wanted to see to send it back to JPAC, or could we just send it back and say, hey, we don't like it, make your changes? I mean, it would seem like that there's a process there that would involve quite a bit of deliberation. Is that correct?
Correct, Councilor Rosenthal. So the expectation would be that the Metro Council would express what you would like to see changed as part of sending it back to JPAC for further deliberation and work, which would then also involve Metro staff as well as the Transportation Policy Alternatives Committee that advises TPAC having an additional doing that work, completing that work, coming forward with a revised plan, holding another 45-day public comment period, and going through the adoption process that we've been going through for the last 6 months.
So we're talking about a multi-month process. Yes.
And
thank you.
If I might add just one thing, thank you. It was inherent in what Kim was saying, but JPAC would also need to agree to those changes. Okay. And then it would come back here. So there would be a real, I think, process of realignment required.
Thank you. Councilor Lewis.
Sure, thank you so much. I might have some thoughts later, but I think really critical for understanding and reflecting on what we've heard here today is the ability to compare this RTP with the 2018 RTP and in particular, the way in which dollars were defined or what the value of the dollar is in the two plans. Could one of you please address the changes in how dollars were defined between these two plans?
Yes, thank you. So yes, I think Councilor Lewis is highlighting some of the testimony today has talked about that there's a doubling of investment in certain parts of the plan and a reduction in other parts of the plan. And I compared to the 2018 Regional Transportation Plan. And I think what is important to be clear about is that the costs that are published and reported in the 2018 Regional Transportation Plan are in 2016 dollars. The project costs that are in this plan are actually in year of expenditure dollars, which is a requirement of the U.S. Department of Transportation in preparing this. So it already is accounting for inflation, and so it's not an apples to apples comparison. I have done, because we have received that feedback as part of the public comment period, have done a review. And on par, this plan is the division of investment in different parts of the system is relatively the same, I think with one exception, that is transit and transit capital, that there was a lack of local revenue match for, to match the federal transit dollars for high-capacity transit, and that is less than what we invested in the 2018 RTP, and is also part of that call for action to secure long-term sustainable funding for transit so that we can provide that local match to then be eligible for the pipeline of investment that Ali described as part of the high-capacity transit strategy.
Thank you for explaining that. The loss of the 2020 measure and our ability to put forward local funds for Southwest Corridor is not only a blow for that project, but also just the ability to go forward with matching at that federal level. So thank you.
Thank you. Councilor Gonzalez.
Yeah, great question so far. Just briefly, thank you to everyone that came to testify today. Question for staff. With the RTP, Catherine, earlier you mentioned some of the sweeping policy changes with mobility policy, some of the items under the regional mobility pricing program as well. So could you give us, so with these changes, the timeline for implementation from working with cities, counties, et cetera, on their comprehensive plans, the TSPs, et cetera, and the level of impact and change that this will have on our system. Could you just, give us a bit of a picture as to what that will mean for our region?
Thanks for that question, Councilor. I'm going to give you a high-level answer and then ask Kim to fill in a couple of details. High level, as we've moved through the past couple of months and heard comments and requests from you all and from the public and from the committees that inform the decision, we have taken a lot of that feedback and included it in Chapter 8, which is the implementation chapter. We know that there's now enough in that chapter that it's not going to be a turn a key on January 3rd and it's all going to be done. So what we will be doing in the next month is working to lay out and prioritize the work plan around those items, and we'll bring that to JPACT and in all likelihood to you in some form in the next, hopefully by early next year. Specific to projects moving through the MTIP process, I'd like to turn to Kim on that, and I'd also like Kim to address the mobility policy and its application and the modeling, the climate modeling questions.
No, that's great, thank you. So in terms of moving forward on the project work, related work, so there are a number of activities in Chapter 8 as Catherine just described, and one of those is, as the testimony you heard, to review our processes around how we're doing a call for projects, how we're evaluating across all of the 5 RTP goals, and recommending changes to how we do that process going forward into the next RTP. And that work we would expect to begin sometime next year, and that it would have engagement and opportunity for feedback. For the next Regional Flexible Fund allocation process and the next Metropolitan Transportation Improvement Program update, that's going to begin in January. And so this adoption of this plan sets in motion framing that work around these 5 RTP goals, and we will be coordinating that work on the project assessment as well, and to the extent that we can even make updates to our processes to how we're evaluating projects for those regional dollars. We will do that and then continue that work leading into the next regional transportation plan update. And what was the third? The climate analysis. So on our climate analysis, there are very specific recommendations in this adoption package around updating the analysis to reflect where the fleet and technology is today and what is the impact of that going into the future. We are also very committed to do the documentation that has been raised in the testimony as well, bringing in the greenhouse gas inventory information that is published nationally out there, continuing to build that as part of our reporting process going forward. And then we will also be preparing a monitoring report as part of our submittal to the Land Conservation and Development Commission as they are reviewing our adopted plan and our progress. And we do have staff. There is a budget amendment that you'll be considering later today to support that climate monitoring and evaluation work going forward. And we will continue to improve our tools. There's no perfect tool for doing our climate analysis, and we're trying to advance our regional goals and priorities. Within the state framework, we will also have new federal rules around greenhouse gas emissions that we will need to also be setting ourselves up for, and they're wanting us to measure something different than what the state is doing. So we're in an awkward space and in a field of climate analysis that is evolving, but we are really working and committed at the staff level and with your leadership to monitor and implement actual emissions, monitor and report on actual emissions, but also continue to improve our tools for forecasting into the future, how the regional transportation plan will perform, how support our local partners as they're working to implement their plans and update their plans to also address the new state rules. The mobility policy work that we will begin in earnest to finalize to support implementation of it through future local transportation system plan updates will begin immediately in the new year. We will be working with cities who are currently beginning an update to their transportation system plan to support them to bring that in, but we will also need to amend the regional transportation functional plan, which directs how local governments implement the regional transportation plan, including the new mobility policy. And it'll be that work that will actually provide more direction to local governments in implementing it, and we'll be developing the analysis tools and methods and guidance to support them and providing technical support directly to the cities and counties as they're embarking in that work. And that work will also begin immediately in the new year.
Hello?
Yeah, thank you. One other question. I mean, having been on JPAC, we've gone to engage with this at a very deep level. There's hard compromises are found everywhere in this plan. With our testimony, we also heard a lot of, the ODOT projects and ODOT, which is an important player, but there are many other players in addition to just ODOT. So can you share how the nature of declining revenue is, and we mentioned too that the local contributions to transit projects is one of the things that is really standing out as a performance issue in the RTP. Can we talk about how revenue is impacting our cities and our counties' ability to also, accelerate our goals and to deliver at the plan level? Just to paint a picture on that. Thanks.
Yes, Counselor, thank you for that question. I think I want to go back to something I said before, which is the RTP is not a funding strategy, but it is a an option, a menu of options that the local jurisdictional partners have chosen to move forward if we can find funding. But your observation about the criticality of local funding couldn't be, it couldn't be more important, because it really is local funding that we rely on to fund safety projects in neighborhoods, often to fund the completion of sidewalks, often to fund transit, both transit, high-capacity transit, but also the kinds of stop and station improvements that make taking the bus more easy and accessible. There's a whole different funding strategy for transit operations, and each of these in its own right is crucially important for us as leaders and for us as folks living in the region to look for opportunities to support. Because without that local funding match for big transit projects, but also without those local funding pots available for some of the smaller projects I was just mentioning, it's very hard to achieve the kinds of outcomes that we want to achieve with this plan. We can put them in the plan, but if we can't get the funding, it's hard to have that part of the plan move forward.
Thank you. Councilor Huang.
Great. Thank you, Madam President. I'd like to pick up a line of a thought from our testimony, kind of around big picture structure and process. And, I'm struck by a comment of like what it means to have a regional regulator of transportation investments. And I'm wondering if there might be kind of examples of that from other parts of the country. And also I wanted to test maybe for Alfred, like what are some of our regulatory authorities here? And one thing I'm thinking of is like, could this council do line item vetoes or something like that? Like, can we cross out certain projects that, may not fit with our values, even though they're currently in that proposed plan? So just maybe like what it means to actually exercise our authority to the maximum extent possible. And then also just on the process, I'm also struck by this is 7 days before, our deadline. And, what could we have done in the previous years to have, more inclusive conversations earlier on? And I don't know if that's possible because we're waiting for local jurisdictions to come up with their own TSPs or whatnot. But this shouldn't be a process that we just pick up once every 5 years. But how do we continuously engage and refine, knowing that this is a living document in many ways?
Why don't I take a first stab at that? And I think there might be some pieces that Roger would answer and some pieces that Kim would answer. But I think biggest picture, under state and federal law, the Metropolitan Planning Organization, or MPO, that is the body that approves this plan, is split between you all as the council and JPACT as the representatives of the regional entities around the table. And that inherently is going to create both opportunity and tension. And what it has meant so far, and I'm getting to your question of regulation, is that the meeting of the mind around values becomes crucially important, because different jurisdictions around the table do have different needs and different priorities. And it's really that sort of putting the values out there and moving toward them that, while it's not regulatory, has been the way to move the RTP and the investments in it closer to the stated regional values here. I think that we should have Kim speak a little bit after you talk to how we will move forward with the next round of project selection, but maybe you could speak a
Sure.
little bit to the legal question.
Yeah, thank you, and thanks for the question, Counselor. So I'm really just going to, I think, echo a lot of what Catherine just said, but maybe with just a little more detail about your question. It really is, it's an unusual situation in the way this is run, but the federal law has created this process wherein the decision on the regional plans have to be adopted essentially jointly by by the MPO, which is of course the Metro Council and JPACT. And, as we've discussed, those agencies have to agree. And so that leads to some of the, the hard decisions and compromises, I think, that Councilor Gonzalez referenced and, also what Catherine referenced. So it would be, it's hard for me to imagine how it would work for the Metro Council to use what I think you described as like a line item veto, because anything that the council wanted to do or change would have to go back to JPACT, and then they would have to agree on whatever that was, and then we would go through the process that Kim described earlier, which could theoretically be another 6 to 9 month process. So the way this is set up, it's really a delicate agreement that has to happen between both agencies.
And just so I'm clear, this is our vote today as a yes or a no. It can't be a yes, but take these things out. That's the equivalent of a no. Is that correct?
Correct. I mean, a no would be, it would have to go back to JPACT to start over.
Thank you.
And then I think Kim might be able to answer, there were some other process questions about maybe around like improving the process, I think.
And timeline.
And timeline.
Yeah, in the timeline. So a couple things I'd just like to remind council that at the start of each regional transportation plan update, we always go through a scoping process, a 6-month scoping process that we engage council, JPACT, community organizations, business, the public on priorities for that update to address. And that leads to adoption of a work plan and engagement plan that then guides the rest of the process. So council adopted that work plan and engagement plan, and we knew at that time, and that was last May of last year, and we knew at that time that we needed to finish this update by today to meet the federal timeline. So we set up and designed a process to accomplish the work that JPACT and the Metro Council directed us to do as part of the process that we're in. We do not wait to start the next update. 5 years from now, we will start scoping the next update in late 2026 because or earlier, and those will be conversations that we will have with you and JPACT as part of following through on the next steps recommended for future work in Chapter 8. But we will begin a scoping phase. We will map out what we want to prioritize because we can't do everything within the time we have. And we really try to use that window of time from when an RTP is adopted to when we begin that scoping phase to complete as much of the outstanding work that has been mapped out in Chapter 8 as we can. We do have a lot that has been identified, and as Catherine said earlier, we will need to prioritize how council and JPACT are spending their time, how staff are spending that time in between now and scoping. And this project process and reassessment of the process, that work is a priority. We're hearing it from you as a priority. We've heard it from JPACT. We've heard it from our community partners that have been engaging in this process. And so we certainly are committed to doing that work. The mobility policy work, the functional plan work that is going to be very critical to be also completed to ensure that as local transportation plans are updated, which is the source of the majority of the projects in the plan, those local transportation plan updates, that they're in line and that the ones that can be completed between now and the next RTP update are forwarding different or updated projects. Maybe they're just improved as opposed to wholesale changes, but improved projects. And all of the analysis and data and information that we prepared as part of this update on safety, on climate, on equity, all of that information is available to our local partners as they go through that system plan updates. We're trying to make that information as accessible and available to support them in their planning work. And it is, the last point I would like to just make is it is an iterative process. All the pieces never are all in alignment, and there's always an evolution. And so, part of this action is really trying to make sure that we're on a trajectory to address all of these different things. The RTP cannot fix all of the concerns and issues that have been raised, but it can provide a path for our region to move forward and for our local partners to continue to update their plans in alignment with the RTP, in alignment with the new state climate rules, which are also going to trigger a lot of updates to local transportation system plans that will further advance climate safety and equity projects as part of those plan updates. And we'll have different projects coming forward, or improved projects, and new projects as well in the next cycle.
Great, thank you. I have no questions. Oh, I'm sorry. Councilor Lewis?
Kim is too professional and polite to say it, but it was not part of her planning process for our back to be against the wall with a 1 week between now and when the federal deadline is upon us. About 9 or 10 months ago, the JPAC agendas 2 or 3 months in a row got blown apart by our need and our urgent discussion on tolling. So I just want to state for the record that we got behind at the JPAC level because we were dealing with a very pressing issue. And that pivots me to a question. We talked for just short of 2 hours about transportation, and the word tolling, I believe, was said twice. Can you please address what this RTP does and does not do around our tolling and pricing policy?
Thank you, Counselor, for that question. I am once again going to give you an initial answer and then let Kim give you a little history. Tolling has been in the RTP as an important congestion management and emissions reduction strategy in the policy sense since 2000 or 2001. And as we have moved forward as a region, Metro has actually led a fair amount of research and analysis work to understand better what a successful regional tolling or congestion pricing project would look like. And that has informed, to some extent, the tolling projects that are actually showing up for the first time as projects in the RTP. There's several tolling projects right now. They are all, or congestion pricing projects, they are all proposed by ODOT, the Oregon Department of Transportation, and they are all connected to freeway, either freeway expansion projects or freeway congestion mitigation projects. So that's how it shows up in the plan right now. Kim, do you want to add anything more?
My addition would just be that the policies in the plan do not require tolling, but it really sets out if tolling is to be implemented, how it should be designed and how it should be implemented in ways that are achieving our climate safety and equity goals, in addition to managing congestion on the system. So it doesn't require it, but it does require consideration of it, and it really lays out a framework for what those projects, what they should deliver, how people, communities should be engaged in that work, and provides direction on developing revenue sharing approaches and other pieces to address the impacts that a tolling program might have on the local system adjacent to it.
And maybe I could add just two last things. One, that you as a council, a number of you have expressed clearly the importance of what Kim called revenue sharing might be called revenue reinvestment as toll and congestion pricing revenues are collected. Metro has been very, very clear about the importance of investment in the local system to address either diversion impacts or help fund transit and other alternatives to tolling, so to freeway travel. So that's one critical piece. And then the other important piece just to mention is the Regional Mobility Pricing Project, which is a congestion pricing project proposed by ODOT is moving through the RTP. It has been proposed, there's been a lot of discussion about it and the impacts of that project that might land differently in different parts of the region. There was an active discussion at JPACT about it, and in the end, what was decided there is that that project will be subject to particularly careful analysis and accountability as it moves through the MTIP process, which will probably happen next year. So there should be an extra layer of transparency and discussion around that.
Thank you.
Counselor Rosenthal.
Thank you. Counselor Lewis's question posed one more, and I don't mean this to be sound like a hostile question, but since we have talked about tolling or pricing since 2018, and since we did a study that said that pricing needs to be a regional, why have we not proposed an alternate tolling plan specifically geared to meet our emissions goals? We know that it's going to reduce travel. We know that it's going to generate funds to control diversion. Why have we not developed an alternate plan? We know that ODOT proposes tolling on the basis of specific projects, and we know that that's not going to be sufficient. So do we have an answer for that?
Thank you, Counselor. I think I would just give you a quick answer, which is that Metro is not a system owner or operator. So we can put the policy and vision and goals out there, but it's actually the work of our regional partners and our agency partners to move actual projects through. That doesn't mean we can't weigh in strongly on those projects, and in fact, that's what we've seen in the case of the RMPP.
But we haven't weighed in on a regional basis, as far as I can understand. We weigh in on projects. And so my question is, as the entity that has a regional perspective, state has a state perspective, local entities have local perspectives, it would seem that there would be benefits just educationally, even though we don't control it, in weighing in on a regional basis and a regional proposal. The recent study, for example, on Highway 26 showed that if you want to cut traffic in the tunnel, you toll the tunnel. That's the most effective way of controlling traffic in that area. So I think there's more that we could do.
Thank you. Any further questions for staff? All right. Thank you all for coming back up and walking through all of that with us. This is a complex topic and a lot of work has gone on, so we'll come back around. All right, counselors, we have two votes coming up, one on the ordinance 23-1496 and the other on resolution 23-5348. I would love to call for a motion on ordinance 23-1496 and then for a second, and then have further discussion on the ordinance. But I know we're going to talk about both at the same time. So we'll have discussion on both of them, and let's just have our big conversation up front. How does that sound? We can get through this because the resolution is actually part of the ordinance.
Are you looking for a motion to adopt both?
No, I am looking for a motion for ordinance 23-1496.
I'd like to make a motion to approve ordinance number 23-1496.
Thank you. Is it seconded?
Second.
Thank you. It's been moved by Counselor Gonzalez and seconded by Counselor Simpson. Counselors, any further discussion? And we'll start with JPAC reps start with the JPAC chair.
Oh, wow. Great. Thank you. Well, you know, I just want to acknowledge that it's incredible that we made it to this point. I feel tremendously proud with the level of engagement and the number of workshops, the efforts that we've made to engage low-income and communities of color in a way that I feel has been unprecedented for this level of transportation policy and strategy, to create a plan that reflects the needs of every corner of the region while acknowledging that there is so much extra work to do. And, also want to take time to acknowledge again the testimony that we've had today in person and online, and the testimony that we've heard through our public comments, our surveys, every level of engagement that we've had, that this plan is a plan, and we do need to come together as a community to gather the resources and gather the political will to move forward the projects that we believe in and that we care about. There's going to be a lot of opportunities in these next few years, especially as we approach our legislature, to allocate resources to these projects that make the level of impact to our safety and to our climate goals, to our equity goals, like we've mentioned over and over again. I feel confident and optimistic, although wary, that we have what it takes as a region to do that. I want to make sure that, and I hope that many of my peers join me in thanking Kim Ellis for your patience, your acumen, and really in all of the grace and technical expertise that you've given us to get to this point. Also want to thank Allie for the hard work on the high capacity transit strategy, which I think is again continuing to move a very important policy forward, and is hopefully positioning us to, once we have the resources, to just be able to accelerate the work in that area. And for all of the counselors on JPAC, our JPAC members, and then all of the people that feed into JPAC support, from TPAC to the staff at the cities, the coordinating committees. There's just a huge amount of work that takes place for us to be able to make the votes that we do. So again, want to appreciate the effort for this co-created process. How grateful I am that we've been able to engage in good faith, and also take the feedback, the recommendations, and frankly the criticism to heart, for us to do better as a region, because I know that we need to, we have to, we have that energy. The council here, from my conversations, we have worked very hard to do the best that we can within this plan, and there is always going to be room to do more. There is a desire and a leadership on this council to do that. So I appreciate the invitation to work together, and this is the start of a conversation. JPAC next year, we're already working on our work plan to make sure that we have the right accountability mechanisms in our MTIP for these large projects that will have a sizable impact in our regional infrastructure, and also beginning our process for the 2028 RTP already, because we're hearing very, very clearly from community that we need to transform this process. And again, we're looking at everything under the couch cushions that we can to step up. So again, we need more resources. I think this plan is a step in the right direction. There's a lot of really good work in this plan. And again, I appreciate the trust of the council to work on this at JPAC. And thank you to Councilor Simpson and Councilor Lewis for working with me on JPAC these last few years. So thank you so much.
Thank you. Councilor Simpson and then Councilor Lewis.
Thank you, Council President Peterson, and thank you, Chair Gonzalez. I want to thank the public for their testimony today too. Compelling, but also balancing the needs of again, very diverse region. I will say, the support of this plan from East County cities, Fairview, Troutdale, Wood Village, Gresham, was unanimous, because one, they need those projects. I know that there are projects in this plan that are big and they're coming from one entity, but underneath all of that, there are some really good projects like the Halsey Main Street project that will help support 3 cities in making sure pedestrians have access to businesses, housing, and other things that make a complete life. And so, I agree with my colleagues, but also it was something that I brought up coming in year 5, on the 5th year of a 5-year process. The process it needs some retooling, and that was something that I also share with my colleagues. So I want to wrap up in saying Thank you to Catherine, thank you to Kim, thank you to Tom, thank you to Ally for all your hard work, engagement opportunities that you did with community. It was felt. People felt heard. And I think that in a climate that we're in now for a government agency to go out and to help people, especially folks who've been historically marginalized or left out, to say they felt heard, that means a lot. And coming out of District 1, we hear that time and time again, especially in East County. And for once, I think a lot of the things that they bring up were heard by us and put into policies that will reflect and help those cities grow. So thank you.
Council Lewis.
Sure, thank you so much. Madam President and Chair Gonzalez, this is a culmination of a lot of work, and so obviously begin with the thanks. Thanks to Kim, thanks to Tom, thanks to Catherine, Margie before her. Thank you to the technical advisory committee members who are all really critical in this process. And moving beyond the technocrats to the members of the community who have spent months and hours at a time, not just reading and reflecting on the document through surveys, but coming to real workshops and places for input. One place that I want to raise is the auxiliary lane policy. That was a big win for us as a region. We got almost everything we needed there, and that would not have happened without our predecessor and former councilor, Bob Stacy, laying the foundation for that question at the last RTP. So moving forward, there's obviously a lot to do, and it's not just a long list of things to do. It's a plan on how we're going to do it, because Chapter 8 is as robust as Chapter 8 has ever been. Chapter 8 is actually a little bit overwhelming. We also have a lot ahead of us because we have a really good toll policy now. It's not just tolling as a tool, it's tolling with ends that work for the region and not just for the state finding dollars. We also have the opportunity to move forward knowing that we are talking in good faith with community, and that extends to the work that we did to actually consult with tribal nations and making sure that their projects ended up in this project list as they wanted them. So it comes down to funding, and it comes down to discipline to make sure that the projects as they come forward through the MTIP process meet our policy needs. That happens through a lot of hard work, it happens through community engagement, and it happens because we all have the discipline to have hard conversations. We had a real hard conversation at JPAC. We're having a difficult conversation here today. There are more to come, and I thank you all for the trust that we're gonna have to have in each other in these future conversations. With that, I'll be supporting this. As somebody said today, it's not perfect, but it's pretty darn good. So that's where we're at.
Thank you, Counselor. I think we'll just go down the row since everybody wants to weigh in. Counselor Rosenthal.
Oh, okay. I thought you were going to go in order. Thanks, Madam President. I have a number of comments, I suppose. First of all, I do want to appreciate the hard work, the due diligence, the creativity, particularly in the outreach to communities and stakeholders that our staff has done. They've been working very hard, and they've responded to a lot of comments and questions and a lot of changes and a lot of difficulty, shall we say, in getting some of the right answers from some of our partners in certain cases. So I appreciate all the hard work they've done. The current RTP certainly is an improvement. It certainly moves in the right directions in many regards. It has some, as Councilor Lewis pointed out, it has some things that, some real wins. But for me, it is not sufficient. It is not sufficient at this point in time. That doesn't mean, and I'll get to my summary on that in a second. I think there's a lot of things that it needs to do. It didn't particularly focus on safety as it should have. It didn't develop specific plans. It didn't specifically focus on climate things. It should have. The fault there lies not with our staff. The fault there lies with, in my view, with council. ever since we got a lot of the feedback from the 45-day review period, we have really not met, we have had council sessions and we've heard reports and we've had questions and we've nibbled around the edges, but we really haven't worked collaboratively to say, how can we address what we hear are the public concerns out there? What are the concerns about safety? How do we really have a vision? A list of projects is great and it's necessary, but it is not a vision for the future, for how we're gonna deal with things. So I'm not satisfied with it. I'm also not satisfied with the idea that we might wait until 26 to start a scoping process. I think the need is a little like we know that the horse has left the barn. Well, maybe we can still catch it, but we can't wait 3 years to start catching it. We have to start catching it now. So the process has to start immediately, in my view. So I think there's a lot of work to be done. There's a lot we can build on. I think it's a very good thing. And then I want to say one thing about the high-capacity transit project. I think that's also good. We need a high-capacity transit strategy. But I would be happier if it was called a high-convenience strategy. People don't ride buses because they're high capacity. They ride them because they're convenient. So we need a high-convenience strategy. So I'm probably going to abstain from the vote on there because I think it puts the wrong emphasis. Transit, one other point is, I represent a district that is 7 cities, not any part of Portland. The view of what the needs are for the region are different from the small cities' viewpoints. Roads are more important out there, but transit is also a very critical issue. Most of these areas don't need high-capacity transit. They need high-frequency and reliable transit. So I think the focus is there, and that's true. That's true in District 2, it's District 3, it's true in District 4. In some cases, high-capacity transit may be appropriate. So I think the emphasis may be a little bit overzealous in terms of high capacity, because I think we have other needs. We don't have adequate transit from, if you look at the high-capacity transit map, for example, it shows Shoals progress. There is no transit out there whatsoever. There's very little transit in the southern tier. So I think that there's some issues there that still need to be worked on. So I have trouble being wholeheartedly behind that, but I certainly think there's a lot of good in it and a lot of good that can be done. So I think we need to move forward because the time constraints of actually stopping the process right now would be more damaging than moving forward and then trying to work on it and get it right and create a better vision going forward. We know what the needs are. I think that's pretty clear. Thank you.
Councilor Nolan.
Madam President, much of what needs to be said has been said, but not everyone has said it, so we're picking up the tail end here. Kudos to the work and energy and insight that has been brought, and specifically, Mr. Chair, to you for guiding the process through the JPAC. There is, in fact, good language. In some cases, it verges on poetry even in the goals within this document. But if you want me to understand your goals and values, telling me about them doesn't really cut it. You have to show me your budget, and I will understand from that what your priorities are and your goals are. And on the whole, I conclude that the components of this ordinance fall way short of what I think we on this dais, we in this room, our local partners have the capability of delivering. And I know it falls short of what the people I represent expect from us, and particularly from me. But I know it's going to pass. So even without my vote. So I'm going to instead focus my comments on what we do after today's vote. Things have been talked about today about process. I have 100% confidence that if we had started this process with clear, authentic commitments to the goals in this document, and we took the budget, the dollars available on the constrained list, and we said, asked ourselves collectively, how do we use those dollars to best deliver on those goals? The list we came up with would look very different than the one that's before us today. And I want to be voting on that list. I'm committed to helping us get to the point through amendments in this plan and real solid groundwork, real solid preparation for moving forward, so that that's the way we plan. We plan by saying where we want to get and then mustering the resources to get us there. But I'd like to put out some specific things that aren't in this plan, that aren't being funded, that I think we should be thinking about in terms of amendments to this plan and other ways we can incorporate them. How about making a bold commitment that 75% or more of additional trip demand in this region and 75% of RTP funding from now forward be met by cleanest modes, transit, carpools, modern versions of jitneys, bicycling, walking? How about, because this region has failed to build out the transit system that we know we need, we've only built out 54% of it, as the documents themselves say, whereas we've built out 98% of car-oriented infrastructure. How about if we say, going forward, at least 80% of our funds will go into transit improvements until we achieve parity? How about we say, we've got to pay for a transportation system. There is no magic wallet in the sky that someone else will pay for it. Let's have users who spend the most time in empty or near empty vehicles driving on very expensive infrastructure pay for that infrastructure. A weight mile tax for individual cars. We all have GPS in our back pocket. We could have one on our cars. Easy technology to anonymize it so nobody knows whether you're stopping at your mistress's house or you're going to a store you're not supposed to go to. Charge people for the miles they drive based on whether it's highway lanes, rapid through lanes, faster lanes on the highway, or even surface lanes. We've got the technology. We can do better than Venmo, and let's be thinking about those big things. I know, colleagues, Madam President, Mr. Chair, we have a lot of work ahead of us. We have the capacity to dream and deliver bigger than we've done here. And I will vote no today, but I am a partner in making sure that we get as close as we can, taking bold steps, being courageous, not letting momentum or habits slow us down. Because as many of our testifiers today have said, the climate's not waiting for us.
Thank you. Counselor.
Great. Thank you, Madam President. I'm going to just start with a round of thank yous. I'm going to thank the staff for your months and years of hard work. I'm going to thank our partners at MPAC, JPAC, and TPAC. We've put in a lot of time and consideration. And I want to thank my colleagues for all the work that you've all done, especially our JPAC counselors and Chair Gonzalez. There's a lot of trust I have in my colleagues to have the right values and approach. And I just really want to lift that up, that this process has really, for me, been about trust. And I also want to thank our community advocates who pushed on this RTP towards our shared goals. Especially want to thank our partners at Getting There Together, the unbundling of the $1.2 billion for safety, the reforming of project selection, the accountability on mega projects, and the policy updates around VMT reduction. Those weren't there when we started, and those are real steps forward. So I want to thank everyone that participated in this process, whether it was just for a couple months or for the last few years. Those made a difference. Based on that, I will be supporting this RTP, but this document is not the be-all, end-all. And for me, this RTP is really about an opportunity to rebuild trust and to lean into accountability. It's about keeping our promises made decades ago or, later on today. And any future changes that move us away from our stated policy goals, I'll be looking at with strict scrutiny. And it is just so important that we continue to engage, day by day, project by project. So I look forward to continuing to participate in this process. I know the RTP is a living, breathing document, and that, today is not the be-all, end-all. And I'm also really, stuck in the practical considerations right now, given the timeline that we're on. And, one of the great honors of my professional life thus far has been to co-chair the 82nd Avenue high-capacity transit conversation. Our community desperately needs better, safer, more reliable transit on that corridor, as well as safety improvements. And I'm not willing to gamble that and return that to JPACT in an unsure process, and actually take us out of project viability for good projects that are happening. So I know we cannot throw the baby out with the bathwater, and that there's good work happening on individual projects around the region. There also needs to be much more work on individual projects that we've all talked about today. And I think that opportunity for continued conversations on those, will continue. Again, this is a menu. It's not the be-all, end-all. It's a living document, and we can make changes, as time goes forward. But I think we got to remain true to our values. But today, based on practical considerations, I'll be supporting this document and looking forward to further engagement.
Thank you. It's been a long conversation. I wouldn't even call it a process. It's a conversation, and it's been a lot of listening, and it's been a lot of prioritization and trying to get to new ways to do business to achieve a lot of goals. So I guess I would just start out by thanking staff as well. We have some of the best in the country because we do the best work, and so we attract the best. And so thank you for not only working at Metro, for staying and continuing to continually scanning the horizon for what are best practices and making sure that we not only walk the talk on best practices, but that we talk to people about what they are, what it means, what the ramifications are. I want to thank this council because I think Councilor Wong said it correctly. I think that we have the right values and the right conversations and the right listening skills to be able to move this region forward in a productive way that does not create angst that slows us down. Because honestly, when people don't have ownership across this entire region, nothing will happen. And if nothing happens, then we are worse off than we were before. So progress is actually being made. It may not be made at the rate that people want, but we need to move forward. I want to thank all the people who have testified all the way through this process, from the very beginning on the scope of it, all the way through to the end. We do need to continually hear from folks. I will point out, though, that one of the best lessons that I ever learned with my master's in urban and regional planning degree was that you listen to the people in the room, and you also have to represent the people who are not in the room. And there are a lot of people who cannot make testimony happen. And so a lot of the organizations that were here are trying to make sure that those voices are represented as well, but we need to hold dear that there are a lot of people who would like to be here and can't, and have a lot of different viewpoints and perspectives on what we should be doing. When I got here to Metro in 1995 as an intern in the travel demand forecasting department, I'm that old. You guys are doing the math. We were not even talking about pedestrian safety. Some of the things that we were putting forward that were groundbreaking is that we were talking about not just doing forecasting, but doing backcasting. What do we want to look like when we grow up? And then let's figure out what that will take. That's the basic foundational cultural change that happened in Metro, and it was a long time ago. So we're basing a lot of the growth and the change that you see before us on things that happened a long time ago that have made us very different. And while things don't happen fast enough, and we can talk about funding, where do we get the money for the bike lanes? Where do we get the money for transit? And I think you've heard that as a continual conversation from this, this council, and we have put our best foot forward many times throughout history for Metro to try and lead on, and TriMet has done that, try and lead on finding financing ways. We have not been successful at the ballot, and we have not been successful at the state level. And so if you want to know where your actions can go, that would be some of the things I would put out there. But what we also weren't doing when I started here in 1995, and I remember sitting in on conversations with federal USDOT civil rights and environmental folks, is that we didn't even know what the words environmental justice meant. And that was clear in our actions and in our plans. And we were told that we could be out of noncompliance for not being able to achieve and articulate those goals. And now we have been able to start working on that. Is it perfect yet? No. But the very fact that at some point during a regional transportation plan conversation that we acknowledged that we were not doing that well, that we said it out loud and we said it as a region, made it so that we could move on and start really working on what does that mean, and working together so that we can make progress together for everyone across this region. So we're adopting a regional transit plan, high-capacity transit plan. I'm not going to get stuck on words, because what's the content of a regional high-capacity transit plan is actually to achieve the goals that were laid out by the region in terms of coverage, accessibility, the ability to access transit, and what does high frequency mean? We have been working on this for quite some time as a region, and the 2020 ballot measure actually had money in it to implement it at that level. What we have achieved with the 2020 ballot measure and now the regional high capacity transit plan is that we are articulating a different way of doing business. We did not go to the RTP to create the 2020 transportation plan. We went to people and said, what do you need? This high-capacity transit plan is a complete and utter outgrowth of the efforts that people have made over the last 5 years to say that we are going to do things differently. There are some statistics that people can throw around that say the region is spending too much here or not enough there, but in reality, we have made a huge leap forward in order to be able to have a plan that articulates our values. So I just don't want us to walk away saying we didn't achieve anything. I think that you've heard that a lot has been achieved, but there's a lot more to do. So I want to thank the JPAC counselors for actually holding to those values as we went through this process and working with your colleagues, because each one of our jurisdictions is extremely different and unique and has different issues that are going on within their part of the region. They have different needs in order to be able to achieve the goals that are stated by each one of them. And it takes a lot of time and effort by the counselors up here for the entire council to negotiate through that, but it also takes a lot more for the JPAC counselors. So I just want to thank them as well. Again, we have had an immense amount of deep community engagement, and that community engagement didn't start 2 years ago. It started almost 5 to 8 years ago. We are where we are, and the voices here in this room are here in this room because of the hard work that happened a long time ago, not because of 45 days ago. We have been listening, we have been changing, we have been morphing. This plan is moving us forward in addressing what our region needs. It's articulating what we need, and we need more funding to be able to accomplish it. So for safety, for climate, and yes, for our economy, because if we do not have an economy that moves us forward with clean energy and jobs with living wage jobs, and those jobs are construction jobs, and all of the other jobs that are related to that, we do not have a vibrant economy that's actually serving everybody. And when 67% of the people in Clackamas County get up in the morning and have to go to 3 other counties to work, and those commutes are not easily done by bike or pedestrian or bus or transit or even by auto at this point, then we have some real equity needs within our region, both in low-income and BIPOC communities, and just being able to say, how do we actually move people so that they have access to the jobs that they needed? We can accomplish these goals, we can accomplish them together, but the obstacle is the financing. And because we have basically starved ourselves of all transportation funding for everybody, it makes it hard to move forward. So for the people here in the red shirts today, I see you and I hear you in dresses and pants. You guys are completely decked out in red, thank you. I believe we are on a path to meet your goals. The path doesn't directly go towards the mountain that we are all trying to climb, but it will get to the top, and it will get further up the mountain when we revisit over time on these things that we need to. I'll be voting yes because this plan has so many important transit and safety projects that need to advance in this cycle, and I'm not willing, and I never have been in my 30 years, to stop progress, but I am willing to say, what do we need to do next? And how do we accelerate what the next step is? And that's why voting yes actually moves us forward faster. And I appreciate all the work that we need to do on the other side, but this council is committed to getting that work done. It includes projects of regional importance, like replacing a 106-year-old drawbridge to Washington that can't carry transit and isn't built on bedrock, but instead on mud at the bottom of the Columbia. I am interested in moving forward. I am not interested as holding us in a pattern where we don't actually achieve any of these objectives, so I will be voting yes. And again, I just want to say thank you to the staff, the JPAC counselors, all of the elected officials, all of the citizens from around the region who have pushed us to do better and will continue to make us do better, so thank you. All right. With that, Connor, will you please call the roll?
Yes, thank you. Counselor Gonzalez.
Yes.
Counselor Rosenthal.
Yes.
Counselor Lewis.
Aye.
Counselor Simpson.
Aye.
Counselor Nolan.
No.
Counselor Wong.
Aye.
And President Peterson.
Aye, the motion passes. Thank you. All right, we'll move on to resolution number 23-5348 for the purpose of adopting the 2023 Regional High Capacity Transit Strategy. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Seconded.
It's been moved by Councilor Simpson and seconded by Councilor Gonzalez. Any further discussion on the high capacity transit plan? Seeing no hands raised. Oh, Councilor Lewis.
Sure, thank you. I think this is really critical. It's a smaller document than our lengthy RTP. In fact, it doesn't give my shoulder pain in carrying it around. But I think it's as valuable, if not more so, because it's what we're doing differently in our region. It's the blueprint for how we're gonna actually draw down federal investments for the really big capital improvements. It does not absolve us for our need to do other transit work, which includes more dependability, more frequency, more service, and more reduced or free fares. That's the other side of the coin with transit, but we have to have both. The federal government doesn't care about our fare setting policy. They do care about our capital investments. That's why this is absolutely critical that we move it forward, because it's a document of major federal match money. And as Councilor Wong said, we have two opportunities, 82nd TV Highway, that are in process right now that are not just important to us planning nerds, but are really critical for community and for folks who don't know a darn thing about planning, but know how hard it is to cross those streets in order to dodge cars, in order to hop on a bus. So that's why this is not just a planning exercise. It's in real time, and it's a real doing exercise. Thank you.
Thank you. I guess I would just say ditto. Any other comments on the high capacity. Just again, thank you to the entire region for getting us to this point, and to the hard work by our partners at TriMet to help deliver this in the future. With that, Connor, will you please call the roll?
Yes, thank you. Counselor Simpson.
Aye.
Counselor Wong.
Aye.
Counselor Lewis.
Aye.
Counselor Nolan.
Yes.
Counselor Rosenthal.
Abstain.
Counselor Gonzalez.
Aye.
And President Peterson.
Aye. And the motion passes. And just for the record, an abstention in this case on resolutions and ordinances, I just want to make it clear what that means on the record.
Yeah, in this case, President Peterson, this is Carrie McLaren, Metro Attorney. No vote on this effectively is 6 in favor. And it just counts as one abstention. There are cases where an abstention will be tantamount to a no vote. It doesn't really have a bearing in this case. Had there been no vote by a counselor, that would have been recorded as with the majority.
Thank you. Much appreciated. All right. I just want to take a moment then and celebrate. I do forget to do this because I get into the mode of getting through a council agenda and making it as efficient as possible, but there are moments to celebrate. Will the Metro staff, all of you who have worked on this, please stand up for a round of applause. Thank you. And there are countless folks, I'm sure, watching from across the region. My hat off to you as well as staff from around the region and the electeds for getting us here, so thank you. From there, we will move on. There's more on the agenda. To our other resolutions, resolution number 23-5353 for the purpose of amending the fiscal year 2023-24 budget and appropriation schedule and fiscal year 2023-24 through fiscal year 2027-28 capital improvement plan to provide for changes in operations. This is our final action today. We will consider a slate of mid-fiscal year budget amendments. With us is Cinnamon Williams. Hello, Cinnamon. Metro's Financial Planning Director to present this item.
Good afternoon, Council President Peterson and the members of Metro Council. Just here to present the first of our scheduled budget amendments. And it's coming after a weighty thing, but it's an actually really small amendment for this time of year, which is actually unusual for November. So it should be a pretty short presentation. So I'll get started. Looking for the slide deck.
Yep, that'll come up in just a second.
All right, sounds great. All right, next slide, please. All right, so in our November budget amendment, this is for the budget speaking, it's the FTE changes. We have some FTE changes and we have some fund level capital appropriation changes. And then we have capital improvement plan amendments, which is something separate. Next slide, please. So of the FTE changes, we have 3 new FTE requests for financial regulatory services, planning, development, and research, and the Portland 5. And then we just have 2 technical changes to move 2 FTE from one department to another. That'd be from Capital Asset Management Department to Parks and Nature, and Communications to IT. Next slide, please. All right, so for what FRS is requesting is for an accountant 2 to replace, we had used an accountant 2 position in the past during the pandemic and for other resources, and we are now at full board, and so that accountant 2 position is being requested again. Planning, Development, and Research is asking for an associate transportation planner. I think Kim Ellis referred to this during the prior presentation for the Carbon Reduction Program grant. And then the Portland 5 is asking for an operating engineer to help with their utility technical support. Next slide, please. The FTE changes moving from one department to the other. Capital Asset Management is going to move one of their construction project managers to the Parks and Nature Department to help directly with some of the planning and work in their parks. And then Communications is going to move a principal public affairs specialist to the information technology. That might seem a little weird, but that is to help with the web design development, and I think there'll probably be a reclass to that actual position. But that's what it's the same work, but moving to a different department. Next slide, please. So these are the appropriation changes. The general fund is moving about 5.3 million from contingency into useful appropriation, and Parks and Nature is moving 261,000. Next slide, please. We'll get into what that is. The general fund is moving 5 million of TOD money. I think you guys saw that resolution a couple of weeks ago. And for the 82nd Property Acquisition Fund. And then personnel services for OMA, auditor, and the FRS department is 268,000. The personnel services for FRS is for that position we talked about. The auditor is requesting some additional funding for their personnel services, and OMA is doing some contingency planning in regards to a retirement, so they are needing some additional funding for that as well. And then Parks and Nature Operating Fund is asking for $150,000 to get taken out of contingency to help with their support levy revisioning project. And then it's the Parks and Nature Operating Fund also does the restoration projects for the department, and that $111,655 is because 2 restoration projects rose to the level of a capital improvement plan. And so it's not very often that the operating fund has capital, but that is the reason why that is. Next slide, please. All right, so now we're moving to the CIP changes. I also have lots of notes. Trying not to use them, my glasses. So anyways, the capital asset, this is basically a 5-year capital improvement plan. Capital Asset Management increased their capital improvement plan for the 5 years of about 420,000. They have 6 projects that moved around. And I should remind everybody, this is the time of year that we have capital improvement plan changes. It's the capital improvement plans for the departments are now over a year old, and so these are the times that they often make movements. IT has one project change that they're increased their capital improvement plan by about 63,000, and then Parks and Nature, like, wow, they decreased by 1.8 million, but that's because they've had lots of scoping changes in that bond program, and they have moved money around. They will probably have additional scoping issues and rebudget that money for FY26. Next slide, please. And then the Portland 5, they've increased their capital improvement plan by the 3.7 million. That is the Schnitz cooler project. As you will probably remember, we also amended that back in June because that was an unforeseen project that popped up. That 3.7 million is getting paid for by other projects that are sliding and moving around, even though the total capital improvement plan has increased by 3.7 million. Now, it says Waste Prevention Environmental Services says 25 projects, and they don't have any actual cost change. They also don't have an appropriation change. That's kind of a typo, but the capital improvement plan did not change monetarily. It just moved around in projects. And that is the end of my presentation, and I am opening up to you guys for any questions. And I do have some of my staff had 1 o'clock meetings, and they might have left.
Councilors, any questions? Councilor Lewis and then Juan.
Sure, thank you so much. Regarding P5, obviously, we are in a unique situation as operators but not owners. 3.7 out of the sky is a lot, and we don't own that building. How much do you think we could recover from the building owner?
That I might refer to the COO for an answer, since I don't have that information exactly how we would get that from the city, since it's an intergovernmental agreement. But
Want to restate that one more time for me? City owns that building that seems to be right in that fuzzy area. How much might we get from the building owner out of the 3.7?
This is an interesting question.
It sure is, isn't it?
Yes, so one of the, I'm sorry, hopefully you can hear me better here. I'm not contagious, I'm just recovering. One of the things that our P5 team and Steve Polstick, our general manager, are working on is an update to our IGA with the city of Portland for P5. Those agreements are old, they've been audited, there's just a lot of issues with them, and the biggest one is a lack of clarity on who's responsible for what. Obviously there's a lot of change happening at the city right now, and it feels like rather an uphill battle to redo the entire IGA, but we are having conversations with them about a limited MOU to just, define some of the biggest pain points. So, I would consider that cost to be a major capital improvement beyond sort of normal maintenance that we might be responsible for. And so I would hope that the city of Portland would take on quite a bit of that.
I'm gonna go beyond hope. And if I'm voting for this package today, it's only because I believe that the vast majority of that will be recovered. And I am saying it on the record that that is my expectation. If it does not become that, please come back to council, because we are gonna take other action.
Okay,
Or I can't say this to council, well, I will introduce other action.
duly noted. Councilor
you.
Lewis, thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, before we move on to Councilor Wong, I guess I just want to put an exclamation point on this, and that is that there are other things happening within the city of Portland with the conversations around the Keller, and having had a conversation with the PSU president yesterday. They made assumptions in their proposal to the city of Portland for taking and building a new Keller that assume that the same relationship holds going forward. That Metro continues in this role. And I just let them know that that has not been a conversation. It's a conversation that we will have to have here in this building between council and staff, and then going back out to the city of Portland, because the IGA is not sustainable in any way, shape, or form. And for us to continue to carry the load, both politically, financially, for things that don't work, even if there's a new Keller, it opens up a lot of questions for me about our relationship and what does that mean for the future. So I'm glad to know that those assumptions had been made, and that we need to reevaluate where we sit in terms of the future of the totality of P5 and this proposal that's coming forward. Not that I want to slow down, again, progress to get a new Keller, because darned if we don't need one. But it is a question about our role and the clarification of that and whether we want to proceed. So, Councilor Huang.
Great. Thank you, Madam President. Probably just a technical question, but in the general fund with the $5 million for the 82nd acquisition fund, it's my understanding, our partners at the state contributed that, and I'm just wondering why it's in general fund, because that isn't it restricted for a
It's in a
particular-
sub-fund in the general fund that's specifically for planning, development, and research that has those interchange funds that will pay for the top.
Okay, so just making
Yeah,
sure
so-
that the original purpose and intent.
Yes,
will-
absolutely. It's
Okay.
restricted to that purpose.
Thank you.
Absolutely.
Councilor Rosenthal.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just a quick, maybe I was a little confused on the 1.7 million that Parks and Nature you said was shifting around. I'm assuming that comes from their general fund allocation or from their bond fund?
Thank you for that question,
and then I have
Councilor
one little
Rosenthal.
comment.
Yes, that is from their bond fund, they get a general fund allocation, but they don't have a general fund, they have a Parks and Nature operating fund that also they'll
operating
let,
fund,
yeah.
But that's from their bond fund.
That is from their bond fund, and they will rebudget those dollars when you'll see in the CIP plan in FY '25, for the FY '25 budget.
And I guess a question on the issue regarding the facilities is, obviously, we're entering an interesting period with an old IGA on a brand-new form of government. That's going to be challenging. To what extent will the Merck Commission be also asked to intervene or weigh in and consider these things?
I do not speak in front of the Merck Commission, but I do know that they have their own budget committee. They will have a retreat themselves that'll be next week. They'll have a conversation, and I'm sure that this will be a part of that conversation and about the capital plan and the forecast of how much money they have and what they can spend. And Brian will present their 5-year forecast for that by each venue and what their capital funds as well.
Great, thanks.
You're welcome.
Any other questions? All right, do I have a motion to approve resolution number 23-5353?
So moved.
Second.
Thank you. It's been moved by Councilor Lewis and seconded by Councilor Rosenthal. Connor, will you please call the roll?
Yes, thank you. Councilor Gonzalez.
Aye.
Councilor Nolan.
Yes.
Councilor Wong.
Aye.
Councilor Simpson.
Aye.
Councilor Lewis.
Aye.
Councilor Rosenthal.
Aye.
And President Peterson.
Aye, motion passes. Thank you. Chief Operating Officer Communication. Good afternoon.
Afternoon.
Well, afternoon.
Well, afternoon. Good afternoon. Well, afternoon. President Peterson and Metro Council, just a quick update for you today. We have received one letter of interest regarding an urban growth boundary expansion from the city of Sherwood that came in yesterday. So just wanted to report that. Again, it's just a letter of interest. I believe today may be the last day for other cities, or it's within the next few days to submit a letter of interest. But we look forward to working with the city on fleshing out their proposal, and of course it'll go through the normal process. So just some situational awareness for you.
Thank you. Councilors, any communication? Councilor Vaughn.
We had a pretty epic day this Tuesday this week, and we welcomed guests from the governor's office in California and a team from Friedman Consulting to talk about public-private partnerships and social innovation. We had that council work session, and I want to thank all my colleagues that came out Tuesday evening at OMSI to hear more about the potential of this project. And we were glad to welcome senior leadership from almost every major foundation here in Oregon, and there was a lot of interest in coming up with more ways to work together to tackle our region's shared issues. And we're looking forward to building on that momentum in the new year. Thanks.
Awesome. Yeah, thanks for staff for getting that together. Johannes Walde in his work as a social innovation program director, and all of the entirety of Metro in supporting this work moving forward. So thank you. Anybody else? Oh, sorry, Councilor Rosenthal and then Lewis.
Thank you. I attended a retirement for the chair of the Oregon Zoo Foundation. As you know, Julie Fitzgerald, she's also the mayor of Wilsonville. So I work with her on a number of fronts. She was instrumental in raising their commitment to help the zoo from $5 million to $10 million and raise the challenge that to $20 or $50 million. And this is going to be very important in dealing with projects that we're going to have going forward and making the zoo truly the best place that we can possibly make it. So I think that that's worth noting. She was a great service to the community and to the donor community. It's a great partnership we have with this foundation. And there was one other thing I was going to mention, but I'll pass to Councilor Lewis because I can't think of it right now.
Well, before we go there, based on the good work by Julie, without her work and the board's work, we would not have had the money to keep zookeepers or feed the animals during COVID, and they were able to, and I believe it was 3 weeks, raise $2.5 million. Is that right, Marisa?
Yeah, it was a really incredible lift that they did in a very short amount of time.
So just like, there's the long-term idea of having a zoo foundation, of being able to put money into capital projects and do more on education over time, but it was almost to the social innovation program level of having a muscle memory, a muscle to be able to go out and talk to the community at a time of remarkable need that was unanticipated, to be able to have shown that we can deliver and that we do have the folks' trust that once the money is given to us in that type of way, that it will be used and it will be used efficiently and we'll be able to take care of the animals. There are a lot of souls up there that deserve a lot of support, and they have it both from our staff and from this community. So thank you. Thank you again to Julie.
Yes.
Councilor Lewis.
My hand was raised only to thank Julie Fitzgerald for her service, and we are sad to see her leave the foundation, but happy that she gets a retirement.
But I did remember my last item, and this is an invitation to Councilor Huang. I found out yesterday, or at a visit to the Tualatin River Wildlife Refuge, that the Chinese community has been very heavily involved in that. So it's an invitation to come out and talk to them about it, and they will give you a whole bunch of information about how active and why they're so active. It seems like an odd location for the Chinese community to be heavily involved, but it's quite nice.
Thank you. I'd love to follow up.
Well, I think that's an invitation to all of us to be able to come out and see it. Thank you. With that, I think we went over all that I wanted to. I wanted to make sure that folks knew about the PSU proposal for the Keller. I think the other interesting part of that is that they wish to add convention conference space to the region, and I suggested that on all accounts of talking to them, that they really bring in our staff from the convention center, from Expo, from P5, to not only know how the Keller is not working today, that gives input into what the vision of a future Keller would look like, but also to the difficulties right now that we are having in the space of conferences and conventions and bringing them here. Obviously, bringing back downtown is a huge part of that, and the perception of safety worldwide about Portland right now is something that we have to overcome, and I want to make sure that we're all understanding what the financial difficulties are in this region because of our what has gone on in terms of some of it myth, some of it just perception, and some of it real. So I think we need to have more conversation with that angle. It doesn't mean that we don't need conference space or convention space or multi-use space for the future, but it means that we need to be practical and really work together to make sure that we're not undermining each other unintentionally for the future. So with that, big day. Thank you, everybody. We are adjourned, and our next regular council meeting will be Thursday, December 7th at 10:30 a.m. See you all there.
Recording.